Good evening and welcome to City Council meeting on June 9th, 2020. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with several of the emergency directives from Governor Sisolak. Therefore, the public is not present at this time. Notice has been given of how people can submit public comments, and we will also have a period of time where people can call in with their public comments. We'll announce the phone number at that time. With that, I will call the meeting to order. I know normally we start our meetings with an invocation. Because of these emergency directives, we have not had the local pastors here to do that. I would just like people to keep in mind, these are very stressful situations for a lot of folks. The death toll in the United States now is past 110,000 from COVID-19. So again, please take a moment to give your thoughts for those who are troubled at this time. Thank you. And with that, we'll move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Madam City Clerk, we have an oath to administer.
I'm sorry, Mayor, we're going to have to push that forward a couple of weeks. We're not able to do that tonight.
All right, thank you. We'll move to our first public comment period then. Again, because the public is not able to be present at this time, and this may be the last meeting where that occurs, the number to call in is 702-589-9629. Again, the number is 702-589-9629.
I already checked it.
Again, this is our first public comment period. It's for public comment on any item on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes, and the phone number to call is 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there email comments?
Yes, there are several.
If you'd like to go ahead and read those then.
Sure. The first is from Bethany Caruso regarding item number 8. I would like to let my frustration be heard both as a citizen and a hangar land lease holder. The May 19th special agenda was held during a time where the public could not be present for comment. I'd like to thank the council for their time and patience during these unnecessarily long meetings. The city manager and city attorney were not providing legal counsel as unbiased officials. Rather, they pushed council members to confusion and frustration during the 6-hour meeting. At the end, you could see and hear the defeat in their voices as everyone agreed to end the meeting. Councilwoman Fulda had a very good idea to allow more time for the city and airport to assess what it will cost the city to take the hangars, as well as giving the tenants time to decide on relocating. Councilwoman Bridges was on a path to potentially enter new ground leases before she was told that it was not an option. Please make a motion to create a new extended ground lease that starts the day after the current Nuno lease expires, and to give 6 months extension of the Nuno lease so that terms can be negotiated fairly. The citizens of Boulder City shouldn't be led to believe that the land at the airport was leased too low for the past 30 years. The city had every right to raise the land lease rate per the contract, but never did. That is no fault of the ground lease holders. In addition, there were no specifications for buying or selling the physical hangar and transferring the leases, another shortcoming from the city decades ago. The airport staff should have been more thorough with its management of hangars with regard to annual cost of lease and transfer of hangars. The airport is a self-managed enterprise fund. The city receives no monies. In addition, the city spends no money on the airport because it is already self-sustaining financially. As a citizen of Boulder City, I feel like my voice has been silenced. The resolution of a 30-day lease is not one that is fair to ground lease holders, present or future. It is completely biased towards a financial gain without consideration of anything else. Time will tell what the real reason is for taking ownership of these hangars. This is a devastating blow to the general aviation community and our community as a whole. The veterans that own hangars will not be here to fly for our parades. Young children will not have a place to be educated about aviation. Families will not pass down generations of aviation history. Our airport will become its own business, no longer part of the Boulder City community. A sad day for my family and many others that call Boulder City home. Next is from Kurt Goodfellow regarding item 8. Dear Mayor and council members, once again, in this item, we see another example of city staff's hasty and poorly veiled attempts to mislead and confuse city council members. First, in the overview, the second item states that on May 19th, 2020, the City Council decided to allow Agreement Number 8985 to proceed to expiration and reversion of the Nuno hangars to city ownership. This is completely incorrect. The mayor motioned to proceed under the terms of the lease, which would entail reversion of the property. That motion failed 3-2. In other words, City Council voted not allow the Nuno leases to expire. There were no other motions made in that meeting. City staff and the mayor did their very best to confuse and mislead the other council members, but in the end, the leases cannot expire until further agreements can be made for new leases. Under financial, it states that there is no impact to the Boulder City General Fund, but will increase revenues in the Airport Enterprise Fund. This is another misleading statement. Yes, revenues might increase, but the city has no idea what it will cost from the Airport Enterprise Fund to facilitate the rental of these hangars. And the city's own staff report from an earlier AAC meeting states that if the hangars revert to city ownership, over $41,000 per hangar must be invested in order for these hangars to meet city mandated codes, along with at least 67 cents per foot for maintenance. This is in a perfect scenario. Cost for the city to rent these hangars could easily exceed revenues, resulting in a loss as been experienced by all of the city's other revenue-generating activities, such as the field farm, golf courses, etc. With regard to the agreement itself, it is a poorly thought-out document. First, in item 7, it states that tenant agrees that they will utilize the hangar for the storage of tenant-owned aircraft and for no other purpose than reasonable de minimis storage of items to support the aircraft and other aeronautical activities not expressly prohibited in the rent agreement. The FAA, who is the higher authority, states that incidental storage of non-aeronautical items is allowed as long as the hangar's primary use is aeronautical. In other words, the hangar must have an airplane in it, but other items such as motorcycles, ATVs, boats, etc. are permitted. Item 12 states that tenants' use and occupancy of the hangar shall be without cost or expense to the city, and then goes on to state if the hangar requires repair, tenants shall contact the airport manager within 5 days of discovery. Whose responsibilities are the repairs? Who's going to pay for the repairs? This is very confusing. I also cannot find any reference as to who's responsible for utilities. This is what I've found in the short time since yesterday when this agreement became available. Folks, the city is moving way too fast in their efforts to take over the hangars. There is no reason why you shouldn't follow your consultant's advice and take several months or years to study these issues and make sure you're doing what's best for our city. As it stands, you have no idea whether taking over these hangars is a good idea or not. Thanks, Kurt Goodfellow. Next is Chad Hesterman regarding item number 8. Mayor and council members, when something just doesn't feel right, admit it. When you are not getting the answers you are looking for, ask again. When you are being pressed to make a decision you don't feel comfortable with, say stop. I'm betting your intuition is telling you something about this whole hangar debate. Listen to it. The hangar owners have repeatedly told you they are willing and able to make the airport as financially stable or more with a land lease renewal. To say that we have not is being dishonest. It is crystal clear that city and airport staff, to include the mayor, have been at best difficult and obstructive in the entire process. To take an offer to make the airport whole with a new land lease agreement with the hangar owners is only understandable and a safe, less liable choice for the city. 1, charge a new lease creation fee. 2, increase the land lease rate to make it equal to the estimated financial benefit of the city getting into the hangar rental business. It's a simple concept that was never explored and is inexcusable, embarrassing, and undefendable. Listen to your intuition. Chad Hesterman. Next is Rich Moynihan regarding item number 8. There are a number of problems with the agreement as written. The airport is owned by the city, but since the airport receives FAA funding, it is obligated to the FAA. It must adhere to FAA rules and regulations and grants and assurances. These assurances don't allow the city to make rules and policies that are more restrictive than the FAA's. The FAA issued a directive on hangar storage. It is called FAA Policy on the Non-Aeronautical Use of Airport Hangars. The policy became effective on July 1, 2016. You can Google this policy to read it, and along with the actual doc, the FAA has common questions and answers regarding it. The policy states that airport hangars are for aircraft storage or other aeronautical activity. It also allows storage of non-aeronautical items as long as they don't interfere with the primary purpose of the aeronautical activity. These other storage items are called incidental storage. In paragraph 7 of the proposed rental agreement, the airport manager states that construction of experimental, amateur-built aircraft is subject to his approval. In the FAA's policy, it states that the complete construction is now considered an aeronautical activity. Therefore, this construction is allowed by the FAA policy. This construction obviously is subject to all safety concerns, i.e. no welding or painting, etc. In paragraph 14, it states that maintenance can be done in accordance with FAA policies by the owner. This should be rewritten to include maintenance can be done by the owner or his employee according to the policy. Paragraph 15 is poorly written. It is contradictory. The first line states the city has the right to inspect hangars without notice. The second line states that reasonable notice can be given. I don't believe that any landlord can enter premises without notice except for an emergency. In other than emergencies, the tenant should be present during inspections. In paragraph 19, the insurance clause is written as if the hangar is privately owned. You can have it both ways. I think he meant to say can't. This needs clarification. Thank you for your time, Rich. Next is Douglas Mueller regarding item number 8. Mayor and distinguished councilmen, as we come to the twilight hours of the reversion of the new hangar leases, I wish to point out a few things. A document called Hangar Rate Study was released. As you may be informed or not, the rental rates were appraised by an appraiser that is a commercial appraiser like an apartment building. Nowhere in the appraisal is a comp to an airport hangar referenced anywhere. Airport property is different from any and all other commercial property. Generally, all across the country, the municipal airports across the country provide long-term storage of aircraft at reasonable rates for long terms from 10 to 50 years. City staff has been made aware of this for years. The Boulder City Airport Association attempted to renegotiate when Mr. Brock Armentrout gave all the Boulder City tenants a lease proposal back in 2006. The tenants of this airport have been trying to secure the future of the tenants' existence and provide the community with a place to store their aircraft. My concern with the current lease agreement proposal is that if we get rogue behavior from city staff that the tenant is in constant jeopardy of storing their aircraft on a public use, not city use, federally funded airport. The city attempted to bring in help to facilitate a fair and equitable agreement, but the city staff never presented to the city council the proposal that was recommended to city staff. Please put the hangar lease agreement back on the table and get this on the next agenda. The FAA will be contacted to help make sure that a fair and equitable offer is made to all tenants so that the city, who's the sponsor, does not lose any future AIP funding. Thank you. And the next one is from Cami Perkins, and it's very long, so I'm just going to put the timer on. Dear City Council members, as you know, I represent several clients who currently own hangars which are subject to the existing lease agreement 8985, either via a sublease or a direct lease with the city. Regarding agenda item number 8 pertaining to approval of the hangar rental agreement format, once again, your city staff misinformed and misled you. Staff's report at page 283 of the agenda packet states, on May 19th, 2020, the City Council decided to allow agreement number 8985 to proceed to expiration and reversion of the Nuno hangars to city ownership. The City Council did not make such a decision. Only one motion was made at the May 19th, 2020 meeting, which motion was made by the mayor to, quote, proceed under the terms of the lease, which would entail reversion of the property, end quote. That motion failed 3-2. After the motion failed, the mayor insisted that if no other council person made a motion, the mayor's motion would take effect because the mayor's motion was to proceed with the terms of the ground lease as worded. Other intelligent council members asked their own city attorney for advice as to alternatives and/or how to word an alternative motion, and no coherent advice was offered. It was apparent that because the members of the council had all been given incorrect, factual, and legal advice, they did not know how to properly phrase any other type of motion to propose extending the current lease or entering into a new land lease. The result was that city staff think they are authorized to move forward with terminating the current lease, exercising reversion and approval of the hangar rental agreement contained in the agenda packet is on your agenda, even though the mayor's motion to proceed under the terms of the current lease specifically failed. Respectfully, proceeding as outlined, notwithstanding the fact that the mayor's motion failed, is a violation of Article 2, Section 20 of the Boulder City Charter. See attached. It is evident that most of you spent numerous hours preparing for the May 19th meeting and familiarizing yourselves with the issues at stake, but you were deprived of your opportunity to make the best decision for your constituents and your city because you were misled and in some instances outright lied to by city staff, namely the city manager and city attorney. Specifically, you were informed that the city could not enter into a new land lease with the Nuno hangar owners. This is legally incorrect. The city can and should enter into a new land lease with the Nuno hangar owners who have offered to pay a substantially increased rental rate and a reversion deferral fee as recommended by the city's own consultant, Aeroplex. The fact that the hangar owners are willing to pay the foregoing dispels of the, quote, giving away value that the city is entitled to, end quote, argument advanced by city staff. The city staff has never presented to you an accurate picture of what it will cost the city to own, manage, and lease the subject hangars. City staff also informed you that no proposals, let me just put them on hold. The city staff has never presented to you an accurate picture of what it will actually cost the city to own, manage, and lease the subject hangars. City staff also informed you that no proposals from the hangar owners had previously been received. This is simply not true. Several proposals were submitted. They were not shared with you. The city also hired an attorney who drafted a new land lease. This land lease and the option of entering into a land lease was never presented to you, even though it is in everyone's best interest. I respectfully implore you to consider for the next council meeting, including an agenda item to discuss and approve the city entering into new land leases with the hangar owners subject to lease agreement number 8985, and allow the hangar owners to present you with their proposal that such new lease to contain an extended term, increased rental rate, and a reversion deferral fee. The hangar owners deserve an opportunity to be heard by you and have a small group of representatives represent them at the council meeting to present all of the pertinent information to you and not just information selectively chosen by city staff to get the result they want and to address your questions and concerns. Please also refer to my letter dated May 21st, 2020, addressed to each of you, a copy of which is enclosed for your reference. Nothing in this letter is intended to constitute a full explanation of any of the hangar owner's rights and available remedies as applicable, and this letter shall not constitute a waiver of such rights and available remedies, all of which are expressly reserved. Thank you in advance for your immediate attention. Very truly yours, Cammie Perkins. Do you want me to... Public comment? Hello?
Yes.
Public comment?
Okay, I think it's the item on the hangers. My name is Rob Martin.
Go ahead.
Is this during the public forum?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Martin.
All right, well, I got a whole bunch of concerns. Mainly, I'm very disappointed with staff. I will be filing lawsuits, which I really don't like to do, but that's going to happen. And Steve Morris, I hope, gets removed as the city attorney by the attorney general, but that's his choice after I file the malfeasance complaint. But, mainly, I wish to let the council know that what staff has done here regarding the hangars is both dead wrong, and they don't even got it right. If you look at what your fire chief did, if you look at everything else, the city won't even make any money off of owning these hangars. The city will actually lose a great deal of money, and I still get to keep the door off my hangar because under Section 14 of my contract, I do have a right to do that and always did. And the police being called down on me creates a civil rights violation by me, and thank God it was nothing bad. And by the way, the police of Boulder City were very reasonable and appropriate that morning. And I did appreciate that, other than they said, we are being directed to arrest you if you won't leave, by both the chief of police and the city attorney, and I have texts that show that from them. And I felt bad for the sergeant, the other 4 officers involved, because they're going, sir, we don't see anything illegal here or improper here, yet if you won't leave, we're going to arrest you. Since then, and I have no idea why they're going to arrest me, because they didn't have a clue either, by the way. I have not been allowed to be on the airport without permission. My card has been revoked, and that's all violation of FAA, by the way. So now the city has created a gigantic problem for itself, because I'm going to be filing an FAA request for an investigation based on the improper conduct of city staff, particularly Brock Armentrout, Steve Morris. I'm not sure quite whether the mayor understood this stuff or not, but he clearly kind of went forward with it, so did Al Naiola. So all this stuff is going to come out, and I will be filing complaints for malfeasance, which will require the state of Nevada to look at the issue of whether police powers were invoked to try to put pressure on a civil contract. Although I do believe I'm certainly right on what I believe the civil contract said on the ground lease. That is a different issue for a different day. On the other hand, both due process and unfortunately the horrible stuff that happened in Minneapolis.
Mr. Martin?
What?
Mr. Martin, this is Mayor McManus. You're at 5 minutes. I would appreciate it if you could conclude your comments, please.
Well, I hope you learn from your mistakes too, Mr. McManus, but that's for a different day. I will leave it where I have, which is truly disappointing, and I would hope many of you on the council would rethink things and think that you should go in a different direction, and I will leave it at that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And are there additional written comments that were submitted?
There's one additional, and it's quite long, from Joel Smith.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, City Council members, for your time, energy, and sacrifice by serving in your post. I actually feel sorry for you at this very moment because after years and years of deflection and procrastination, this entire mess has landed in your lap, basically because all the past council members avoided this, just like COVID-19. I own T-2-13. Contrary to the multiple statements by city staff at the special council meeting regarding our lease renewal, not only do I own my hangar, I also am my own master leaseholder and am not under Rob Martin. City staff continues to refer to the 28 hangars as the Nuno hangars, and that all of them are under Rob Martin as the master leaseholder. This is not true. I have all the signed and dated documents that state otherwise, and I have a receipt and an account established with the City of Boulder accounting office where I pay my ground lease directly. Why is this important? It's important because of the long list of misinformation stated and used during the last council meeting. Multiple city staff members in that meeting sat idle, not saying a word or correcting anyone as to this obvious mistakes of language and position. The importance is that no one said a word. This directly points to the exact reason we are in this situation. No one wants to own this entire mess. No one wanted to in the past, and now the fix is to use a walnut switch game and hat trick that was created by years and years of kicking the can down the road until today. Right now, in your face, this issue is here. My point represents a major issue with reaching damage based on the fact that no one in that room that day wanted to correct anyone because the agenda was already set. The decisions were already made before that meeting ever started. It's crystal clear and it's on public record, hence the reason it's time to stop this train. Pause and do what is right, because most times doing what's right for a community has a way bigger return than a calculator and popularity contest. City council members, please stop and correlate my above example to this entire process. You have simply not been told the truth. You have been told one side of the story and have yet to even understand the people like myself behind this issue, because city staff has not acknowledged even the mistake I used an example above in public. It was stated multiple times that all 28 hangars were under Rob Martin, so much that it's very obvious that the failure to choose renewal and go to reversion is being highly influenced by him being the master tenant for all 28 hangars. Finally, the city council members, I ask this one simple question. Have any of you ever walked through any of these hangars? Have you seen the pride of ownership and the years of work that have kept general aviation alive and well at BC Airport? How can you be deciding something without driving 2 miles down the hill and walk this property, meet the owners firsthand, see what we do day in and day out? Most importantly, I ask that you show that you have actually been on the ground instead of listening to and reading documents that reference this entire mess from 2 miles away. Come to the airport, see these hangars, and meet us firsthand. Listen to all the information that surround this issue, including the single biggest one. A new hangar lease can legally be started today, regardless of the old lease expiring. Best, Joel Smith. And that concludes the written comments that were received.
Thank you. Again, we are in our first public comment period. Comments during this period are restricted to items on the agenda. If anyone would like to make public comment, you may call in now to 702-589-9629. Again, anyone wishing to speak during public comment for items on the agenda, the phone number is 702-293-9210. My apologies, I had the wrong number there. That's the number you could have called earlier today. Currently, the phone number to call is 702-589-9629. All right, hearing no others, we will go ahead and close the first public comment period and move to approval of the regular agenda. Madam City Clerk, any changes? No changes. Mr. Bolt is sitting in for the City Manager. Any changes?
No changes.
And Mr. City Attorney?
No changes.
Thank you. Bring it back to council. Any changes or comments, questions?
No changes. No changes.
None for me, Mayor.
All right, entertain a motion then to approve the regular agenda.
Make a motion to approve the regular agenda.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move to approval of the consent agenda. Madam City Clerk, any changes?
No changes, Mayor, but I'd just like to point out that there were some very small corrections to the minutes that were placed before you.
Thank you. And I assume those will then appear in the
finals.
next.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bolt, Acting City Manager,
No changes.
and Mr. City Attorney.
No changes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Bring that back to council then. Any questions, changes?
No changes.
Okay, do we have a second a motion for approval?
Mayor, I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move then to item number 6, consideration of Bill 1877 to amend Title I, Chapter 9 of the City Code to amend the general fund balance and minimum operating reserves. Ms. Gillis, I believe I have your name correct.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Okay, so tonight we're here to make a slight amendment to our financial administration. Staff is suggesting that we adjust our cash flow reserve balance in the general fund to be between 8.33 and 16.67%, which is about 1 to 2 months worth of our general fund expenditures. This is to bring us in line with the change to the NRS that was made a couple of years ago. Then we're also recommending to add a section that would cover all of those other operating accounts other than the general fund that don't have access to those new special revenue funds that we have been creating that would basically assign those balances. I got it. You got it? Okay, thank you. And we're recommending that that balance be at least 20%, which is consistent with the prior code. Adequate fund balance is necessary to ensure that we're financially stable. We have created those 5 special revenue accounts that basically assign that balance rather than leaving it in our unassigned balance. And again, this brings us in line with the NRS at the 16.67%. And this is just a table that shows that with our fiscal 21 budget, even with our the COVID-19 impacts, that we would still be above that minimum. The other operating funds would include more cops, crime prevention, cemetery, airport, utilities, and the RDA. And there's a table here showing, go back one. There you go, thanks. There's a table here showing with our fiscal 21 budget, the last column are the adjustments that we would make based on the 20% of budgeted expenditures for the year. And that was included in the budget that was approved in May. And then the last slide is just an example of some of our other cities around us, surrounding us, and what their percentage of unassigned balance is. And you can see Mesquite and Henderson are in that range that we're recommending, while the larger cities of North Las Vegas and Las Vegas are slightly higher. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions or comments? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. I just wanted to confirm, so the budget for fiscal year 21, that last column on slide 267, it would mean that we would fund increase the funding to crimes prevention, cemetery fund, and so on?
Yes.
That would come from the general fund? Or?
No, it's only going to come from their fund balance. We're just moving it into a separate account that we call the reserve account within the fund. So it stays within the fund balance. We're not moving anything between funds, just within accounts in the fund itself.
Okay.
So we're just basically reserving it within the fund.
Okay, I understand. So there's really no money coming from anywhere else. It just stays within the fund it currently is in. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Again, I know we've talked at length about this during the budget process, the reasons for doing this. Previously, we would end up with these very large ending fund balances, but we did not have money assigned where it probably needed to be assigned. So the question that Councilmember Bridges asked about these other funds, I believe that the majority of those are enterprise funds, is that correct?
Yes, so all the utilities in the airport and cemetery are enterprise funds.
Okay, and the more cops, there are a number of legal restrictions about that money. It's an additional sales tax that was approved several years ago and can only be spent to hire officers, is my general understanding of that. So again, what we're basically trying to do is get a better idea of our budget. That's what it seems to me.
Yep.
Okay.
So make it more transparent.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then consider a motion.
Mayor, I motion to approve Bill number 1877.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Gillis.
Thank you.
We'll now move to item number 7, presentation of the annual fire department report. Now that Chief Gray has been on board for our first declared emergency in the history of the city, he must be well versed. So
I'm learning a lot. I'm enjoying my time here. I haven't been bored, that's for sure. Alrighty, let's see if we can get it up here. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council first. I'm the Fire Chief, Will Gray, and I'm going to cover a few points here. Obviously, since I've been here, we've been a little bit occupied with the coronavirus, but we have got a lot of stuff done. I will say before we start, the presentation's missing a lot of data, and that's really because the record management system that they have currently is used around the country, but it's really notorious for being able to put stuff in and not get stuff out. So we've already reached out to a data analyst, and they're working with us to actually create a portal in there so we can get in there and pull that data. So next time I come before you, we'll have some really good statistics and stuff to be able to show response times and some of that other data. So just a quick overview. We operate 24/7. We have 7 people on duty every day. We have 6 reserves currently. Actually 5. So the 6th one is awaiting some testing. So our goal is to bring that reserve program to 25 or 30. It used to be one of the premier reserve programs in the country, and it's a really valuable resource for us. And so we're going to make an effort over the next couple of years to run a couple academies a year and try to bring more people on board, which will really help with our response. It also helps fiscally. It's a lot less expensive to have a reserve firefighter fill in than it is to have a regular. So we're working hard on getting that built back up. We currently respond out with 1 engine with 3 people on it and 2 ambulances. We do have a 3rd ambulance that's staffed when we have extra reserves. And so part of their commitment to being a reserve is they have to work 2 shifts a month. So as that program builds up, we'll have more reserves available. We'll be able to run that 3rd ambulance when we need it. And that's really important for us in Boulder City because most of the patients that get transported into Henderson. And so it's not uncommon on a given day to have both ambulances in Henderson. And so having that 3rd ambulance available is really valuable. Henderson does come in to help, but when we're looking at cardiac arrest or some of those other more serious incidents, we really need those resources here faster. And so while they're amazing and coming and helping us all the time, we're waiting 8, 10, 12 minutes for that. And so that's where that 3rd ambulance will really come in handy. So the services we provide, obviously we do paramedic level transport, fire suppression, and that's wildland fire. One of the items that we were able to get through today on consent agenda was a mutual aid agreement for wildland firefighting. Structural fighting, car fires, any kind of things like that. Auto extrication with the I-11, they've seen an uptick in those kind of accidents. Community risk reduction is something that we're going to focus a little bit more on as we work through our community risk assessment and identify what the risks are in Boulder City. We'll be able to better educate the public on those specific risks. That's where that risk reduction education comes in. Historically, the fire departments around the country did fire prevention training every October. We go to the schools and we talk to little kids about matches. The reality is a very small, and you'll see in a slide in a minute, a very small percentage of what we do is firefighting. We have a lot of other risks, medical risk and stuff, and so the big push in the industry has been to do more education in the other risks and to do more EMS education, to look at, do we have an issue with falls in our elderly community? Do we have an issue with hazmat, illegal shops, different things like that, and to do more enforcement, code compliance, things like that to help reduce those risks. So it's an area we want to focus on. So in 2019, we responded to 2,543 calls. As you can see there, 7.7% of our calls were medical related. That's in line with the industry around the country. It's about 70% is what you see nationally. Fire departments now run medical. They almost should call us medical departments, because that's really what we do. 1.6% of our calls were fire suppression calls. Again, unless you live in a city like Detroit, where they have a lot of empty houses and lots of fires, that's a number that you see common across the country. It's a pretty small percentage. And then one of the things that we were proud of is 0 fire fatalities in 2019, and there was only 1 minor fire injury. And so hazardous conditions, those are hazmat calls, things like that. People spill fuels or different chemicals, gas leaks. The other calls for service, and that's really where that good RMS system comes in, that good record management system, is where everything else gets lumped into. So that can be an assist up, it can be arcing power lines. There's hundreds of different things that fall into that other. So on our project updates, we just finished the station renovation at the beginning of this year. There's a couple little things that are getting tweaked now, but for the most part, the station's in amazing shape. We got our first fire engine, or our newest fire engine in mid-February. It's in service and running right now. It's, again, a great fire engine. And then we just ordered a new ambulance, which we believe will be here in about beginning of 21. They typically last 6 or 7 years, and that's on those ambulances. Fire trucks last a lot longer, but those ambulances, just because of the wear and tear that we put on them, they just don't last that long. So as far as grants go, we're in need of our air packs, our self-contained breathing apparatus. That's about a $160,000 need. So our plan is, providing we get the support of the leadership in the city, is to seek an AFG grant for that in the fall. Basically, it would be a 95% grant where they would cover 95% of that 160,000 if we were successful, and the city would cover the last 5%. That's an item that's going to expire. They get out of service. They have to be replaced, and so this would be a way for us to hopefully reduce that price significantly. Just some costs, some numbers from Medicaid reimbursement year to date. Medicaid is one of those things that's kind of behind. It's kind of like the GFOA for finance. You get the 2018 and 2020, and so a lot of it's lagging. So you can see the numbers up there, about $800,000 for the fiscal year 16 to 18. Fiscal year 19, they're looking at $180,000, and they're anticipating another $250,000 for fiscal year 20. And that's not the only fees. We also have the regular insurance fees for ambulance and stuff. So this is just a portion of the fees collected. So some things that we've been working on in the first 4 months, we've revised our response policies. So one of the things we did is come in and looked at all of the policies and how we respond and why we do those different things. One of the changes we were able to make right away is change how we respond out of the station. They were at times leaving with 2 ambulances at the same time. Well, when you only have 2, that's an issue. So we were able to move some manpower around and respond a little bit differently. So that's helped. The only time we'll see everybody leave at the same time is for a cardiac arrest. It takes 7 people. Or for like a fire or a mass casualty accident, like a big accident on the highway, then they would all go. But for our day-to-day medical calls, we're just seeing 1 ambulance or sometimes an ambulance and a fire engine go, so that helps. We've been reviewing some of our department policies and trying to bring them up to industry best practices. Like I said before, we're working on redeveloping our fire reserve program. We're modernizing our training. Right now, we're working on a community risk assessment. It's something that we weren't able to find. Basically, what we're doing is looking at all of the risks in Boulder City. It doesn't really matter what the risks are in other cities for us. It matters what our risks are here. So we're going to look at what the fire risks are, the age of our buildings, how they score out as far as risk, what's the potential for fire spread. We'll be able to rate all those buildings. We're going to look at I-11 and what the hazmat that runs up and down I-11, what kind of risk that presents. We'll look at all those different risks, what our specific medical types are, our community, where they're at in the community, and that'll allow us to better understand what risks we have, and then we can come up with a better plan going forward on how to deal with that risk. And so that's something that'll probably take about 6 months. It's a pretty comprehensive document, but it'll drive us in the future how we're going to move forward, how we're going to respond, when we come for requests, it won't be based on, well, this sounds like a great idea. It'll be based off what the risks are in Boulder City. And then like we talked about too, the data analysis improvements. And so hopefully in July, the data analysts will be able to come back out here and kind of work together between our CAD system and our record management system and be able to extract 5 years of data is what I've asked them to find for us, so we can get a good picture. We're not just looking at a couple of months. I want to look at, where things have been, and that'll help us better determine where we're going to go. So, and that's what I have for you tonight. Do you have any questions?
Questions or comments from council? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, thank you very much for your report. I do have a question. It's more theoretical. If you are called to an accident on the I-11 in Boulder City, I think I had it in my brain about who pays for what from the previous item on the consent agenda. Who pays for that? Is it because it's in Boulder City, it's a Boulder City expense? Is it because it's on the I-11? Does it, like when you get to Arizona, that's no longer the Boulder City?
Yeah, so typically the way it works around the country is, it's in our city, it's our call.
Okay.
Now, there is a reimbursement mechanism that can be done for hazardous materials and for car wrecks. Not many cities do it, but it's actually something we could do. So anytime there's a hazardous material spill, we keep track of all of the costs, man hours, we can charge those. You can do the same with auto accidents. You can bill their auto insurance companies. Again, it's not done by a lot of places, but we don't currently do it here. It can be done.
Okay,
but
so
right now we pay. It's just part of the day.
So it's the insurance company of whoever created that problem or that caused the accident and so on.
If we had that in place right now. If you had that in place, sure. No, right now we respond out there, take care of the problem, and come back, and no one's the wiser.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
I thought where the lines are and who does what.
Yeah, like I said, more and more fire departments around the country are starting to look at that. There's some that are starting to look at when we go to houses and we don't transport them, there's insurance companies that will actually pay you for not taking somebody. because you still were there, you still did some services, but it benefits them if they don't need to go, that you can treat them and release them. So there's some departments that are actually being able to recoup that money too. We don't currently do that. We just charge when we take them into the hospital.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Chief. I certainly appreciate your ability to hit the ground running with us here in Boulder City. You did kind of cover my one question a little bit with your last slide about the changes in the department, but given that you've had the opportunity to recently be a part of other different department before coming here, now that you're here, what are at least some areas that you were impressed that our fire department was able to accomplish given our circumstances, and what are some of the areas that you would like to see us improve that have been working in other departments that you've seen?
First thing is, to show up and have a essentially brand new station with great equipment is always a bonus. That helps. And then there's some features in there like cancer awareness is a big deal in the fire service. A lot of firefighters die of cancer because the risks are higher because we're exposed to different chemicals. So you already have some of those in place. With the vehicle exhaust systems and stuff that are in there that pull that out of there. We were able to implement a clean cab idea, which is something that's new, but we had a brand new fire truck that's never had dirty fire clothes in the cab. They're not allowed to put it in there. So that's why when you see them on a scene now, they're going to be getting dressed at the fire, because those dirty fire clothes will never go into the cab of the truck. It actually exposes them as they off-gas. It's a really dangerous practice, but a lot of people have old fire trucks that have always had it, and it's hard to do. So we're able to implement that. But I would say the thing that impressed me the most is I have 21 of the sharpest guys I've ever worked with, and I don't. That's not I'm not a disparaging remark to Colorado. I had great firefighters there. I haven't found a firefighter here that's not excited to be here. A lot of them have passed up better paying jobs in the valley. Some were in the valley and came back here. They just like to be here. And as far as being willing, I haven't asked anybody to do anything that hasn't been eager to do it. They're happy, they're in a good mood. So to me, that's the biggest thing, Concerns for me is we have a really small fire department and a very big city. This is one of the biggest cities in the country. I know our population is small, but our responsibility is big. If we have a wreck out on 95, I think it's 95. Am I right? Going out towards Searchlight? I was shocked coming back from Laughlin. My wife and I went for a ride one day, is how early you see Boulder City sit limits. And so there's a big area, there's risks that we haven't looked at before. We are looking at now, like people getting lost in the foothills, and how do we go get them? Well, we hadn't had training before. So we're working on getting some search and rescue training for our guys. So we're working on some of those things, but staffing is a concern. But again, until that risk assessment's done, for me, those are premature. I can tell you what I think we should have, but the risk assessment will show us what we really need to have, and it will drive those conversations. I believe the mayor told me early on, made a comment about data. I'm all for data, because we can always have our opinions and get emotional, and that's really doesn't mean anything. But when we start to look at the numbers and what the travel times are, and some of those numbers, they'll be enlightening to all of us. We'll learn a lot of stuff about us that we don't even know today. So that's really the focus right now for me.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes, Chief. Could you expand a little bit on the community risk assessment and how you're going to work that program?
Yeah, so I think a lot of you know, before I came here, in addition to working at Pueblo Fire Department, I worked for the Center for Public Safety Excellence as a volunteer. And so I travel the country and evaluate fire departments. Part of that process is we develop community risk assessment. So I've done this a few times before. But basically, we want to look at every aspect of Boulder City. So we look at, like I said, building ages. Building construction based on different time frames was built differently. So some buildings are balloon frame, which means they don't have fire stops in them. So those fire spreads faster, so that when we go through and evaluate some of our historical buildings, they'll get a higher risk rating. And that might mean that we have to inspect them more frequently, or we have to do things to protect that risk or to lower that risk. From an EMS side of things, we're going to look at our community as a whole. We look at different demographics. We look at different races, so in Pueblo we had a high Mexican Hispanic population. Diabetes tends to be higher in that specific demographic. So when we did our community risk reduction efforts, we needed to be more focused on diabetes in our community, because that was a bigger impact in our community, where some other communities might have bigger issues with seizures or something that wasn't as big a deal for us. So it helps drive our decisions on how we prepare. But like I said, flow studies for the hazmat, what comes through our highways, what comes through town on Nevada Way. It's important for us to understand what's coming to town so we can prepare for that. So we're going to go through that process. There's different scoring sheets we do to rate buildings. there's some nationally recognized models, OVAP and RAVE, that basically say, you get this many points if it's this construction, this many points for this type of occupancy. So if a building has an assembly where we have a lot of people in it, it's going to be a higher rating because the life safety risk is more there because there's people in there. Whereas a storage building where nobody's in, it might be a lower rating. So we're going to go through and rate all that. That's why it takes so long. But we look at time of day, day of week that calls occur. We look at all kinds of different things. And that helps drive staffing decisions. So if we see that, so for example, in Colorado, we had certain times of the day throughout the week that were really busy. So instead of asking for another fire station and another fire truck and 9 more people, which is millions of dollars, we actually put in service what we called focus response units, or F-150 pickups with 2 guys in them. And we were able to staff during those peak demand times. And that was probably 15% of the cost of that new fire station. It still met our problem, and we still were able to take care of it. But it took that risk assessment to identify where those problems were so that we could actually put a solution with it that made sense. Because even out there, we were a big department. We had 10 stations, but we had a very finite amount of money. So we had to try to make things work inside of our budget.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Folda?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Fire Chief. So a couple of comments I had was the new shiny fire truck that you are enjoying. I just want to comment on that because I remember this was obviously before I was on council, but it was also before the VERV count had been created. And so there wasn't really a plan for these expensive automobiles that need to be replaced I think that one previous was 20 to 30 years old. And there wasn't really anything set aside for that. And so that will probably be the last vehicle, hopefully, that will experience, having to have a voter approve for it, because now we have a way to track these expenses and be able to plan ahead for those kind of replacements. Because unfortunately, you guys are very expensive. You have very expensive equipment, yeah. Which is important to have, but there is some planning that needs to be done to make sure that you can have that equipment. So I like down here that you're looking for grant opportunities and other things that will help pay for those needed materials and equipment, but find another resource also to help fund those.
Yeah, if I could, we've actually approached finance, and because we have 2 high dollar items, our cardiac monitors and our air packs are both about $160,000, and they both last about 10 years. And so we've actually asked about creating a similar idea like the VERF, where we could budget $10,000 a year for each of those, so that when we get to the end of that, we have most of the money in place.
Right.
And so it's something that they're open to, because what my goal is when I leave here is that we've made it better, but we also have the stuff ready for the next person to come in and not have to figure out where to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right, and I really appreciate that moving towards that planning ahead, because it's not, if a fire truck breaks, that's almost $1 million piece of equipment. So to have that plan ahead. The other thing is that we're currently undergoing a study, and I think that was either done administratively or before I was on council. So for that risk assessment, but I was just, I know that we have an older population here in Boulder City, and I just noticed on your calls for service for 2019, basically 68% of those calls are with life support transport or basic life support EMS calls. So just seeing that there's a high need really for ambulances more than fire at this point in our city, it looks like.
Yeah, and so that's where that risk assessment comes in. And so while we don't run as many fires, when we run a fire, the National Fire Protection Association sets a standard and says you need to have this many people to safely fight a fire, and this much equipment. That also drives our insurance rating in the city. So currently the city's an ISO 4. So the biggest break in insurance costs is between a 4 and a 3. I think in the past they were higher, something occurred, and it's not uncommon as the rating scales change, you move in and out of that. So, but what they do there is they count the number of fire trucks, the number of people, the distance in miles. So a lot of that plays into our insurance rating too. And so I agree with you, ambulances are valuable. We also can cross staff where we have fire trucks that they can respond if it's a fire, and then if it's not, then they jump in the ambulance, and so they can go back and forth, which is something we would use too.
Okay. I just wanted to know if that would, take into place that we're not so taken by medical so much that were taxing, if there was a fire as well, what we would do. Because while fires seem to be more rare, we need everyone when that happens.
Yeah,
so.
the consequences is higher potentially. I mean, if it's a occupied building, we could lose many people. Typically on a medical, we're talking about one person. So it is, and that's why our help comes from Henderson. But I can't say enough how thankful I am for Henderson Fire. They do a ton for us. They're like the big brother everybody wishes they had. But they're 15 or 20 minutes away. And when we look at structure fire, there's a time frame. It's 6 to 10 minutes from the time a fire starts till it flashes over, and that's when the entire room fills up with fire. And that's not survivable. So we're really looking at that 6 to 10 minutes, how many people we can get there and start putting water in there. And so the times, even they're coming to help, unless it's a really big fire, that big event's going to occur before they show up. And so that's why we really need to be smart how we deploy our resources. And
so I know this has been a hot topic, at least in the community, of having kind of an outside ambulance service. If that's something would be considered with this risk assessment, if that was something that would be of value to us or not.
I think that's a policy decision for the city leadership, but I would say we had an outside ambulance in Pueblo. There's benefits of it. The negatives that I always saw is, and they were helpful, but it's a for-profit business. Their interest is for the profit for their stakeholders. When it's a city-ran, the leadership of the city is responsible for this, so they have input and they have say. Where the other one's just a 5-year contract, and they do what they want. If they take a little longer, it's their business model. For us, we're held accountable by the city council and by the city leadership, and so I think there's a lot more oversight and I don't know. The fire-based EMS services, I think, in the country are better. And I didn't have one where it came from, but I really think we were working towards that. It's hard to get there, and so we were trying to get that, but it takes a lot of training, and there's an initial cost up front to buy all that stuff. And so where it's already here, I personally would hate to see it go because it's hard to get. So, and like I said, we wouldn't have the oversight that we have now. We'd have some, but it's very limited.
So you can't have both. You couldn't have city EMS and partnership. I'm just wondering if this risk assessment takes into account the time that EMS is transporting usually to Henderson or
absolutely
that part.
No, we look at every aspect of it.
Is that going to be
so we're going to look at how long it takes when you call 911 for dispatch to process that call, how long it takes once they notify the station for people to run to the trucks, how long it takes to drive there, what the delays are causing that, how long it takes to get water on the fire, how long transport and out of service time are. We look at response reliability. How reliable are they as far as, are they always out of town? Because when there's a certain percentage of unreliability, that's when we really have to start talking about resources. But again, it's data driven. It's not,
right.
I mean, it feels like they're really busy, but when you start looking at numbers, sometimes they're busy and sometimes they're not. And that's why that data is really important to drive that.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that.
I know, just following up on some of the questions here, we were able to add 3 firefighters last year. Is that enough? Probably not. That's why I'm very happy to see your emphasis on the reserve program. I know from doing a little bit of reading on the internet about small communities like Boulder City, there are some that are relying for more than 50% of their firefighters are reserves or volunteers. That's certainly not an ideal situation, but that is a possibility. I know that in the past here in Boulder City, as you mentioned, that was a strong factor in being able to provide the support, especially when those structure fires, although they're rare, you need a lot of people there who know what they're doing. So I'm glad that you're emphasizing that. Clearly, budget situation, it's going to be tight for at least the next year. So that may also help us get through that. You mentioned earlier, I like data. I like data because I think that helps you make smart decisions. And I know that that's an emphasis that you've had as well. When we talk about the I-11, that is an interstate freeway. Helps service much of Nevada. And that's something where I believe if we have data, if that is requiring an awful lot of service from this small community, that then gives us the ability to go and talk to county and state leaders and say, look, we're a small community here and we're having to put forth an awful lot of resources on there. But without that data, of course, it makes it impossible to go and talk with them about that. So I'm glad that's an emphasis of yours as well. Again, we look at what's happened over the past 4 months now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for all your efforts in getting our Emergency Operations Center set up. I know the talk now amongst several of the groups, the county level groups, let's not forget everything that was necessary along the way should this happen again. So that I believe we were fairly well prepared, but having gone through it, we can certainly learn lessons along the way, and I know that's been an emphasis of yours as well.
Add also is something that we did today. We actually met with the National Park Service and with BLM, and so we're in discussions with them. Is they used to have structured firefighting responses. We already kind of help each other in the wildland arena, but I talked to the new chief out there and said, hey, if we provide training anyway for our guys, if your guys set into that training, we can bring you up to that standard. They're stationed here in the city. I said, could you respond and help? And he said, yeah. So that's an area, it's a long-term fix, but it's something else we're looking at because there'll be trained firefighters doing other things right here. Why not help each other? And so that's another area we can get some people to help us sooner than later. And that costs us nothing other than, we're already doing the training. So if it's 6 people or 12 people, it's actually better with 12 people. So they'll get to sit in and we'll just train some more people. So we're looking at everything to try to, my thing is, I have an obligation to keep the city safe and to keep those 21 people over at the station safe. And that's really important to me. And so anything I can do to make that happen is my goal. So.
Yeah, and again, being a small community, the mutual aid agreements, I know the city of Henderson has been very generous with their help and support for us. We have a long tradition here of working with the Park Service and sharing those resources as well. So those are mutually beneficial as well as being mutual aid. So again, thank you for making that effort. Any other questions? Again, thank you, Chief Gray. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, that will bring us now to item number 8, discussion of a possible airport hangar lease.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Bryce Bullitt, your Administrative Services Director. And you have before you for possible action, discussion and approval of hangar rental agreement. Part of the backup material that is an appraisal that put the fair market value at 33 cents a square foot. And I can try and answer any questions you might have on that.
Any questions or comments? Councilmember Folda?
Yes, so during my briefing yesterday, we had some discussion of the appraisal that it did not accompany this packet, and it's not part of the agenda title. So there was discussion of whether or not we could discuss the appraisal and include the amount of rate that we would insert into this rental agreement. Not sure if any of the other members had that discussion, but I have a concern whether we can move forward with the appraisal portion and discussing it.
That would seem to be a question for the city attorney then, if he's available.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Let me just reiterate the question so I make sure I heard it correctly. As to whether or not there can be a discussion about the appraisal, because that was received on Friday, and copies of that were published, but on Monday, I believe, but not included in the packet. The agenda title that is before council tonight is the approval of the format of the lease, which is now populated. The missing term, if you will, of the lease agreement was the amount. And so the council previously ordered the appraisal. The appraisal was received, setting the market value, and that market value is being proposed as one of the terms and conditions of the lease. So it is within the council's purview to discuss the terms and conditions of the lease agreement, and the appraised value is one of those terms and conditions. So it's my opinion that you wouldn't be in violation of the open meeting law by discussing the terms and conditions of the lease agreement, which include the appraised value that we have now received.
Councilmember Foley, did you have additional questions on the subject?
I just don't see how I was told one thing yesterday and something else today, because I had asked questions of whether or not we could discuss anything other than having to approve the appraised value. And I was told that was not part of the agenda item, and it would have to be a separate agenda item created. So I'm confused as what to do with anything with this, because the hangar rental agreement attached is blank as far as the amount, and there was no appraisal amount placed in this. We didn't receive the appraisal until Monday morning, which was 150 pages. I'm not sure if everyone in council was able to read all those in the day that we had them. So I'm complex of what to do, because I've been told something different yesterday than today.
On this specific issue, any other questions or comments from members of council regarding the ability to discuss the appraisal?
Yeah, I think I do have a question. Okay, so would it be fair to say we can discuss the dollar amount of rent as long as we use that $4 per square foot as the rate of rent? But if we were to discuss, for example, whether or not we could charge less or more, or whether that could be a graduated rate, the appropriateness of that particular appraisal, those issues would not be part of this discussion, but only by plunking the $4 into the blank spaces on the lease. Mm-hmm. Then we're within the boundaries of appropriateness.
You would be within the boundaries of what is before you in the agenda title.
Exactly. Well, that's yes. Within the boundaries of what's in the agenda title, as long as we use $4 in that blank space and not try to discuss other appraisal or a graduated system or anything like that. Those would all be outside of the title of the agenda item. And
correct, and properly if that's the will of the council, properly agendized under another title. Section 140, subsection B of our city charter, basically states forth the conditions when an appraisal is ordered by the council, that the property would be leased in this instance at or above the appraised value. Okay. And so within section 140, there's that range, right, if you will. Right. If the council wanted to discuss something other than that, there are some provisions within state law, but again, that wouldn't be appropriate under this agenda item.
Under this agenda item. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
I guess I am slightly a little bit more confused now than I was a second ago. Just to be clear, I mean, we are talking about this rental agreement, and right now that space is blank, what I'm looking at. I know that an appraisal was given on Monday, but I'm looking at this blank space. And until I got that appraised value on Monday, I was just assuming that we were I guess, going to be kind of making it up or discussing it or what have you. Obviously, we had the discussions. I'm not saying that we should entertain ideas that might contradict what our charter and what NRS states, but I would think that certainly we can have the conversation about what the terms are going to be in this lease so that we can at least have that conversation of whether or not we want to move forward. Is that correct?
Yes, as I stated earlier,
Okay.
the lease that's before you is to the format. The rental amount is one of the terms and conditions of that lease.
Okay.
And with the appraisal, that's what staff is recommending,
Right.
is that be filled with that amount.
Right, and I understand that recommendation, especially considering that there are laws that dictate that type of thing, but we can discuss if we wanted to consider other things. And I'm not saying that we should entertain that, but I'm just saying if that was something that somebody was looking to discuss.
If there's terms and conditions within that lease agreement that the council would like to discuss, you have the ability to
All
do
right,
so.
thank you.
Yep.
I join Councilmember Adams in understanding or being confused about how to understand being able to use just one piece of information out of an appraisal and then say, but you can't talk about the appraisal, because if we couldn't talk about the appraisal, then we didn't know about that one piece of information. So I don't see the congruity there with being able to say, well, you can take that one number out of the appraisal, but you can't talk about the appraisal. If the appraisal didn't exist, then we wouldn't know that number. So I don't understand the logic behind it, to be honest with you.
Part of that, Mr. Mayor, is that the appraisal is prepared by a licensed individual. And if you want to talk about the appraisal, that individual would be the person that would answer those questions.
Well, he's produced a report. We often rely on reports without having the author or the team available that contributed every piece of information. What I'm getting at is, if we're saying we can't talk about what was in the appraisal, because the appraisal doesn't actually give one number, it gives a range of numbers. And to say, nope, you can only pick that one number and that's it. I don't see that as being congruous with talking about a lease agreement or where the number came from.
And again, I'm not here to debate that point, Mr. Mayor. If the council has concerns about the appraisal itself and what is the number and how was it generated and is there a range or is there not, again, I don't know that staff is the best to be asking that question, because we didn't prepare the appraisal.
Well, what we're asking is, since the appraisal was not part of the agenda packet, is it appropriate to discuss any aspect of the appraisal? I believe, was that Councilmember Folda, was that your question?
Yeah, yes, in part, yes.
Well, don't let me speak
Well, let me
for
go
you.
through it all over again. So basically the terms and questions that I had yesterday, when I had received, so basically this is the same document that we saw a month ago being brought forth. So that's all I saw when I went through this agenda packet. There was no changes to it from when we saw it at the airport meeting in May 19th. I received the appraisal an hour before my briefing. And so I had not reviewed the appraisal, I only skimmed through and saw, the recommended amount number. So my question was then, can council set the price for this rental agreement? And I was told that we could go with the appraisal, but not make any other changes to it. So then my question was then, we would have to make that another separate agenda item and have it come back. So when I'm looking at this agenda item as it's written, it's to approve the form of this document. This document hasn't changed since the last time we saw it. So we're kind of gone off of what we've asked for and what we can actually discuss. I'd like to have a discussion of what we're deciding on, but we don't have anything that's changed since we last saw this document.
Councilmember Bridges?
Okay, I'm getting the feeling that 3 hours from now, we're still going to be going in circle. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just concerned. Is it possible to approve the hangar rent agreement with, I know I have some questions and additions and changes that I might like to see, minor things, but not fill in the blank and then have on another agenda a discussion of the appraisal of that $4, of whether or not that $4 would be the number that would go into the blank, even though our charter says that we're supposed to use the appraised value. There seems to be concern over whether $4 is that right number to put in there.
And so that would be part of the concern, right? So to answer the prior question, obviously if you're able to discuss the terms and conditions of this contract, one of those being the amount, right?
Right.
And so if the council has concerns about the appraised value, you can certainly discuss those, but that might trigger other issues as far as, okay, well, we don't like the $4 that was there. We think that it's a range, and we would like it to be less than that. And so it's that very issue that I would have concerns about just because of what our charter states. I think the council certainly has the ability to discuss any concerns they have with that value, but whatever the consensus is with that may trigger other things within our charter. So that's the concern that I express.
Okay.
Councilmember Hoskins?
Well, I'm just totally confused because what I proposed to discuss this evening dealt with that assessment. If we can't discuss it and go into detail, because there's more to it than just the $4. There's more to that report than just the $4. There's a lot of statements that I would have liked to have read, and it has a from here to there type of dollar amount. If we can't really discuss those, then I don't know why we were presented that at this time. I think we should have been presented it later.
I don't think we're saying discuss it. That's not what I'm saying, is that you cannot discuss that. You can discuss that. But to take action on something that could be deemed contrary to our charter, I have reservations about that. And so if that's the direction that we're going, right, after that deliberation and that discussion, then perhaps at that point we might need to agendize something to deal with that issue, because our charter is pretty clear on that, right? So if there's individual concerns from council on the appraisal itself, again, I'm not saying that you can't discuss that, but the ultimate action that's taken up on that, if it's lower than the appraised value, then there's an argument that would be contrary to our charter. And so if that's the case and that's the will of the council, then we need to stop and take a look at that as to why we're going that direction.
Were you finished, Councilmember Hoskins?
Well, I kind of agree with Councilmember Bridges in that maybe we should just stick with what's on the agenda and agendize this for later, since we can't really talk about it, and we don't want to have an open meeting violation. I've never had one before, but there's a first time for everything, I'm sure. So that would be, I mean, if we're given something and we can't address it, I don't think that's fair.
Councilmember Fulda?
Thank you. I just, I've been down this road, so I can tell you, Councilmember Hoskins, that, I just recommend not moving forward at this time with this until it's re-agendized so that we can have an actual discussion. Because even entertaining some portion of a discussion can lead us into a road of leading, outside the perimeter of the agenda topic. And that's what I'm concerned with, because I have made motions before that referred to the documents that were in the packet even, and yet they were said, you're going outside that perimeter. So I would caution the council with moving forward with any kind of discussion this time until it's re-agendized so that we can actually have a full discussion. Because really, how can we decide on something if this is a good for the city when we don't have any budgetary information? I mean, nothing has changed in this document, including the suggestions that council made the last time we saw it, since we last had it in front of us. The typos are still there. The suggestions that we haven't changed. So I wouldn't move forward with this the way it is. I would say that this needs to not go forward this tonight or have further discussion without it going off the rails.
Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I have a question for City Attorney. Only because I'm trying to figure out in my mind where the problem lies. Is it the fact that because they said that they recommended $4 becomes the appraisal, and that by changing that in any way, we are risking being in conflict with our city charter? That is the problem? Or is the problem by discussing issues within the appraisal and saying, well, they said there was a range and couldn't we, and starting to look at the details of that because we weren't presented with it earlier. Is that the problem, or are they both possibly the problem?
There's a potential that both could be. And so the recommendation of Councilwoman Fulda is appropriate, that if that's what the council wants to do is really dig in to the appraisal and the methodology that was used and the amounts, then it would be wise to agendize that specifically. Because within that discussion, you could likely reconcile as well the amount, so that we wouldn't run contrary. If it's the will of the council to consider a lesser amount, then it would be within that deliberation and discussion that you could, potentially sort through that and work that out. I don't know if that's, but to answer your question, yes, both have the potential of becoming issues, problems.
I would just remind everyone that the action requested is that the city council approve the hangar rental agreement format. It doesn't say approve the rent. It doesn't say to discuss the appraisal. It doesn't say any of that. So this conjecture that we can't discuss the appraisal, I'm in agreement. That's not part of the agenda. It says to discuss the format of the lease. The statement that we can pick a figure out of the appraisal and plug it in here and say that's it, I don't see how that's possible, because we are talking about an appraised amount and it's not part of the format we have within our packet. So it seems to be pretty straightforward to me that we can discuss the format of the lease agreement, which is what the agenda item is, and not approve any dollar amount to be assigned for the lease.
And that would be appropriate, Mayor, if that's the will of the council. If you would like to discuss that portion of it tonight, I would agree that would be entirely appropriate.
Thank you. Then I will go ahead and make a motion at this time to restrict the discussion to the format of the lease agreement as stated for the agenda item, and not for any discussion of any dollar amounts for the space rent. Anyone wishing to second that?
I'd second that.
Any discussion?
So to clarify, Mayor, you're asking to go ahead and have the discussion about the rental agreement and possibly approving it without including the dollar amount?
Correct.
We would have to come back to us before a dollar amount is put in there, correct?
Yes, that's an essential term of the contract and would require the council's approval.
So then my thoughts on that would be, why would we even discuss it now without having the full terms? Because nothing in this document has changed since we last saw it. So I would rather have it come back as an agenda item that we can fully discuss the aspects around it than try to stay within a very tight, narrow bound that we could potentially get off subject.
Okay, anyone else for discussion of the motion? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'm in agreement with the mayor in terms of discussing the format of the hangar. I know that hangar rent agreement, I know that there were some things I learned and some research that I did, and I would rather bring the hangar rent agreement back with all the other parts of the format approved, and then work with, if we're going to have a discussion about the appraisal and about the appropriateness of the number that we're going to put into the blanks and rental amount, that I'd like to focus on that part separately rather than have to do the whole thing all over again.
You wish to withdraw your second to the motion then?
I was just explaining myself. Thank you.
Okay, we currently then have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that carries 4-1 then. We will then move to discussion of this item, which is the city council approve the hangar rental agreement format. Any questions or comments regarding the format of this lease?
Yes.
Councilmember Bridges.
Okay, I do. First of all, recognizing that this was not the triple net lease and that this is the regular quote-unquote lease, the item of property tax, insurance on the structure, and maintenance of the overall structure, I wanted to get a little bit more clarity on that. In terms of property tax, is that part of the rent that's paid by the tenant, or is property tax part of what is covered in that rental amount?
Actually, I stood up here, but that tax question, I don't believe there is a tax for us.
So the city doesn't pay tax on its property.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and in terms of insurance on the structure?
So what we do is we insure the structure as a city, and that's part of the airport's insurance, and we'll be doing that, as well as we require like a renter's insurance from the tenants as well. So it ends up with the structure being double insured.
Double insured, okay.
So yeah, we have insurance on the entire airport, and we also name the buildings then as items in the airport's insurance. And then we also require the tenant to have insurance on their airplane, as well as, in case they do damage to the hangar itself.
Okay, and also item number 19, insurance, and it's the only time I saw the word lessee in the entire contract, so that confused me, and I believe it should be tenant. agrees to carry and keep in force general liability insurance.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think it was the only place where lessee was not changed to the word tenant.
Yeah.
And, and then maintenance. So if people are always talking to me about the doors, it seems to be an issue of what people have had to pay to put in new doors, replace doors. Does that now become the responsibility of the city? If something in the electric door process fails, that is now the responsibility of the city?
Yes, it's a responsibility of the city, but let me explain that these particular hangers are just doors that are hung up on rollers, little rollers.
Okay.
And you roll them off to the side manually. There's no electrical hookup to these doors. The doors that they're talking about are the big bifold doors that open like this.
Right.
And those are quite a bit more complex. I can tell you that they can be expensive depending on what you buy. I just replaced two of them, 2 years ago up in Vancouver, Washington. And I'm not going to dispute how much anybody's paid on their hangar doors, but I don't think they're quite as expensive as you might be led to believe for replacement anyway.
Okay. And finally, one more question, please. It was addressed in a public comment, and I have looked it up on the FAA website, and it does say that in 2016, the FAA stated that primary purpose of an aircraft hangar is aircraft storage. This has to do with Section 7. And if a hangar is serving its primary purpose, the storage of aircraft, then storage of non-aeronautical items in the hangar does not violate the airport sponsor's federal obligation. So if the FAA says that and we don't, is it implied that the FAA's rules are to be followed, or are we changing that?
No, if you read further into the actual law, it has stuff that indicates incidental non-aeronautical items in hangars could inhibit the sponsors, the city's ability to meet obligations. It's one of those things. The FAA doesn't mandate that we can't be more restrictive as long as it's fair and equal across the board.
Okay.
That's our decision, but it has to be fair and equal.
Okay. So we can go ahead and have 7 as it is, as long as 7 applies to every
hangar that we own.
Every hangar.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're saying is you can't keep your motorcycles in there, you can't keep your...
Well, the hangars are there to store airplanes.
Absolutely.
And I do have a de minimis storage clause in here. Mm-hmm. Am I going to go walking around the hangars and see if somebody's got their motorcycle parked in the back or one of the folding motorcycles that goes in the airplane? No. I mean, that's not the intention, the spirit of this. The spirit of this is to ensure that aeronautical activity prevails.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. So under the question, Section 12, maintenance and repair, tenant shall reasonably maintain and keep in good state of repair, free of any debris or waste, materials, the hangar and the facility therein. Tenant shall at all times keep the adjacent apron, taxiway, and pavement of hangar door free of any and all obstructions and interference to adjacent hangars. If the hangar requires repair, tenant shall contact the airport manager within 5 days of discovery. But I don't see, and maybe it's just because I missed it somewhere, I don't see that it says that we are responsible for maintenance. Is that just simply understood, or should it not be written in there that repairs are the responsibility of the city?
The landlord is responsible for the maintenance of the structure. Whenever you put something regarding maintenance into a contract like this, at least the ones I've done with hangars, it's when you require the tenant to perform a certain maintenance function. So by not putting a variety of maintenance functions in here, we're not requiring them to do anything.
Okay.
Other than cleaning.
16 is warranties and guarantees. The city makes no warranty or guarantee of any nature whatsoever concerning the condition of the hangar, including the physical condition thereof or any condition which may affect the hangar or the airport in general, and it is agreed that the city will not be responsible for any loss, damage, or cost which may be incurred by the tenant by reason of such condition or conditions. Sounds to me like we're kind of writing excuses for ourselves. If we don't properly maintain and something bad happens, we're not guaranteeing you that we are actually in fact responsible.
So this is very similar to what happens at a public storage unit, or they call it public storage, but you know, where you go and you store your items from your home, where they don't take any responsibility for your items within it, and if you cause damage to the structure, we don't take responsibility for what the tenant has done. And there's probably better attorneys than me, because I'm not one, that can read this and, you know.
Gotcha. So then, yeah, I guess I understand the idea that certainly if someone trips and falls in their own hangar, that's not the city's responsibility. But when it talks about the actual condition, physical condition of the hangar, and that we're not guaranteeing the condition of it, it feels, and yet we're saying that we want to maintain the maintenance and upkeep and stuff, it feels like a disconnect to me.
Well, you'll find clauses similar to this in any storage facility or any many, anyway, rental facilities. Apartments, I know was in the apartment that I'm renting, so it's a get out of jail free. I don't know what to call it, but it's certainly common.
It might be common. It doesn't mean that I'm any more comfortable with it.
I can understand that too.
20, when it talks about subleases, assignment transfer, subletting, I agree that we don't want people subleasing, kind of making money off the backs of the city. I kind of understand that, but I do know there are a number of individuals who kind of maybe share the space because they they don't necessarily have the need for the entire hangar. Right. But that, being able to have kind of that flexibility, is there any way in which we can allow for, I don't know if it would be considered a shared lease, or if two people want to occupy the same space and be able to divide that? Is that possible under this agreement?
Certainly. That's no problem. In fact, that's a very common thing. And if we were going to do that, it would be a joint lease. For instance, if two airplane owners wanted to rent one hangar, then we'd name them both on here, and we'd have a signature block for both, and that they would pay equally, assuming they would, but we would have a single point of contact and a single account number for that hangar, but both parties would be responsible. There's also the option that there'll be joint or fractional ownership of an airplane. In that case, it works exactly the same way. You write down the partners it would be literally the same rental agreement. It would just have the different names.
So it is allowed under this format?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very common.
All right. And then the last one, and I'll tread lightly here, but it is under number 3, but the 3.1.3 notification, tenants will be notified of the rate increase to 30 days prior to the effective date of any change made under this section. I would just, knowing as somebody who knows that sometimes a month is not enough time to prepare, that I would like to see if we were to move forward with this format. I personally would like to see 60 days, but I'm just throwing that out there as to my comfort level. I do still have concerns, as I said, with the warranties section, just because I really don't like that language when we are saying that we're now responsible, but maybe we're not. So, but other than that, that kind of covers most of my questions right now.
So To answer your latest question here about 3.1.3, I don't have any problems with making that 60 days if that's what council would like. It's certainly an easy thing to do.
Councilmember Hoskins?
You answered all of my questions yesterday in the briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilmember Folda?
I just want to state for the record my disappointment in this agenda item, and I don't know why we're moving forward with talking about it at all. This isn't good governance. We can only do one thing, and looking back on the May 19th discussions that we were having, there was a lot of concerns with this, and it's brought exactly the same way we had before. I'm feeling that we're being pushed into one decision and not free to really discuss what's good for the city. There's a huge financial impact that approving this agreement will have. We don't know what that is because, even in the background it says, this will increase our revenue. We have no idea what that is. And I just want to state for the record, I don't know why we've been moving down this road, and I would really caution approving this, any kind of motion that approves this agenda item. It's not transparent, it's not good it's not what this council stands for as far as letting everyone be involved in where we're headed. This is really disappointing to me, so I just want to state that for the record. There's typos in this one. Under page number 28, it says City in Boulder City. It should be City of Boulder City. It contradicts itself, like Councilman Adams pointed out, as far as the maintenance and repair. Underneath number 12, it says the tenant's use and occupancy shall be without cost or expense to the city. Well, how are we fixing up stuff if they're not causing us any cost? Because there is a cost involved, and that's why it agitates me so much that we're not discussing any costs, because the whole point of having these hangars and the whole point of an enterprise fund is to make sure that they're sustainable, and we can't even have that discussion. There's what I would talk about if we were allowed to talk about the appraisal is that it contradicts this statement, and so going forward, that's why I'm discouraged with going forward with any kind of recommendations on this, because there's talks about points in here and what they're required to use. So, and I can't even talk about it. It contradicts itself with the document that we're not talking about tonight. So how do we make a decision? How is this good governance? And that's my concern. And this isn't the direction I wanted to go. I don't even know how, there's so many issues, and I would love to discuss it, but that wasn't what was staff provided for us to do. And so that's my biggest concern, is really having a discussion that is good for everyone involved. I don't think this is what this council stands for, and I'm just disappointed that we're moving forward with any kind of discussion at all. So it would be my recommendation not to approve anything but make suggestions, but not make any improvements tonight, because if this comes back with the appraisal, there's some issues between the two that if we were to approve this tonight, it's going to come up later. I hope that makes sense.
Mayor, may I say something, please, to address some of Councilmember Folda's concerns?
Madam City Clerk?
Thank you. With respect to some of your concerns that you've expressed with the hangar agreement itself, although you might have expressed those concerns in the meeting, there was no directive provided to staff, so this is an opportunity for you to do what Councilmember Bridges and Councilmember Adams has done, point out the specific things that you have concerns with, and at the end, you can all vote on the format of it, and we can bring it back. So it's in the, you can approve it tonight with those changes recommended, and then we can bring back the terms or you can always make a motion to bring back the whole thing. But the issues that you're speaking of need to be addressed by the council as a whole and voted on by the council as a whole, so staff can take that direction from the body.
Right, and thank you, Madam Clerk. That's what I'm confused about, because we did that on May 19th. We made suggestions, and then we asked for it to come back with the appraisal. And that's not what happened. And that's what my concern is. Why are we going down this road when this is what council had asked for?
The motion just said to move forward with the lease. There were no specific recommendations for changes that were motioned and voted on by the body. It was just to move forward with not the triple net, but the regular lease agreement.
Right. But before we made that motion, we were assured, just like we are being assured right now, that it will come back. It was come back, and it's exactly the same thing. We were told on the 19th, yes, it'll come back, but we have the appraisal. When we have the appraisal, it'll come back to us before we make any approving. Now we're going ahead and trying to approve something when we were told it was going to come back with that appraisal, and it's not. This is the exact same document we talked about before. So why are we going in circles and making any kind of recommendations is beyond me.
I have some questions on this as well. I think that the point that Councilman Adams made about the 60-day notification of rate increase, I think there might even be a law about rented property and the amount of time that is required to notify a tenant of the increase, and I believe it's actually 90 days. Now, there's some language in here for escalator. Well, let's not do that, Mr. Williamson. If we're talking about the law and we're talking about a legal document here, let's not shrug and say, well, gee, I don't know, because
no, Mr. Mayor,
it's a legal document.
You're incorrect. You're assuming that I was doing something. I agree with you. If there is a law and it says 90 days, we make it 90 days. That's okay. That's what this is.
Well,
it's okay, sir.
It's really not up to the council members to be legal experts and to have to ferret out every possibility within these documents. It's not our responsibility to do that. When these documents come to us, they should have been vetted for what state law is and what's required within the documents. For us to continually have to ferret out all of these problems, and I don't even know that it is a problem, but that's really not the role of city council. It really is not our job to do that. So I want to make that clear, but I do have a problem with the amount of time given for an increase, and I do believe it may be in state law. So that's one question that I have, and that should I be the one to make a motion on this, I will be certain to include that within my motion. So that's one. The statement about insurance and about, I know it was brought up in public comment, and I believe that Councilmember Bridges also brought it up, where it's stating that they have to carry insurance. Okay, it very clearly states there that what they're required to carry is general liability insurance. That is not insurance on a building. Okay? If it was, it would be worded differently than general liability. So the requirement there is that they are carrying liability insurance. And then further in, it says they must also carry insurance for their personal property, which would be the airplane, which would be, if they had a set of tools in there, that would be personal property. So I just want to clarify that the requirement for insurance is not requiring them to insure the buildings, and it's not double insurance on the buildings, because it very clearly states that it is general liability insurance and personal property insurance.
Very well.
With regard to transparency about these discussions, I've been on council now about 3 years. I've been coming to city council meetings for, 8 years. I have never seen an issue that got the amount of time of discussion before city council that this issue has gotten. We have heard from the public multiple times. We have heard from a variety of people. And when we talk about what is transparent or not transparent, I believe that is a burden on each council member. If they have an issue, they need to bring that issue up. If they are unable to, for whatever reason, that's not an issue to say there's a lack of transparency. I've gone to some of the meetings that have been held before. Some were AAC meetings, some were special meetings for the consultants to present information. One thing that I never heard at those meetings was a commitment by any city official as to how this was going to be handled. I heard a lot of suggestions about it, but I never heard somebody say, here's what we're going to do and here's why we're going to do it. I do understand that other members of the council, some have a year, some have a little less than a year. This is not a new issue. I know it's being presented by some of the parties that are involved in this as though this is all new and there's not sufficient information. This is actually an issue that has been discussed for years, literally years. There have been a number of public meetings, public discussions, and while it's true that the city council never had that come to them until this council started having it come to them, there certainly have been multiple discussions. There's been a consultant who made a recommendation to the current leasees that they may consider forming their own association and presenting a lease. To my knowledge, that never occurred. So when I hear in public comment about, oh, well, you never saw this. Well, I can tell you, I've got a folder full in my inbox of emails of people providing information, and yet I've never seen anything like that being presented. So when I hear all these things, oh, this was done and that was done, I'll be real honest. In my 3 years on council, I've not seen a written proposal for a lease being presented by anyone, other than the discussions we've had in the last few months on this subject. So I think it's very clear to me that we are trying to do the best job we possibly can for the folks that are down there in those hangars right now. A question I have too about the storage of non-aeronautical equipment. I don't know that it's currently being done, but I've seen RVs stored in these hangars. I've seen boats stored in these hangars. I've seen all number of things stored in these hangars. What exactly does the FAA say about storing items in the hangars? And I am not willing to say, well, it'll be up to the airport manager to take a look and decide whether they have a preference one way or the other on it. That's not particular to you, Mr. Williamson. That's just not a good rule.
So to answer your question, Mayor, and I understand everything you said there, no problem. There is actually quite a lengthy law regarding this. I have it in my hand. And, well, I'm not sure if you wanted me to try and read this darn thing or not, but it does express a variety of things. It does say that, yes, you can store other things other than aeronautical stuff as far as the FAA is concerned. Then it comes to the city council, and it's what do you want to allow to happen on your airport? And that is the question. Where it really comes into a factor here as far as the FAA is concerned is the extra storage impeding aviation, and is it contrary to the promotion of aviation? I mean, those are my words. I think that if City Council is really interested in this, I should give you the actual law and let you guys read it and understand it fully, because To be honest with you, I don't know if I could read the whole thing and not stumble all over it. It's,
I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that. What I have a problem with, and I think this might be, and I really, well, I won't even say it that way. When we have these discussions and we talk about, well, I have an issue with this or that or whatever, and then nothing changes. And so we're being asked tonight to approve the format of this lease. And what you've just said about storage of something other than something that goes up in the air in these hangars is defined by the FAA, maybe not defined by the FAA. If it is defined by the FAA, it's up to the city council to decide. But then it's up to the discretion of the airport manager to tell them whether they can keep it or not. I don't see that in the lease.
okay. I can understand that. That's why I have written in here aeronautical and de minimis storage in support of aeronautics. Then I also go on to point out that temporary storage of a vehicle or motorcycle while the aircraft owner is flying his airplane, which is actually contained in the law, the FAA's regulation. I put that stuff in there. Coming from experience with hangars and renting to aircraft owners and boat owners that store stuff in hangars and a variety of other things. And whenever I have the part in there where it's my discretion, I'm the city's professional whenever it comes to looking at aviation. And if somebody's bringing in a rusted out hulk of an airplane and saying, oh, it's a restoration, well, I'm the guy, I'm the eyes and ears for you on site to say, no, that's just junk, or yeah, that could be a notable project. If you don't have me down there doing that, that means you've got to get somebody else to do it. Unless you're all aviators and you know what you're looking at. And that's fine too.
I'm not sure those are the only two choices available.
Okay.
If we reference back to that particular FAA document, and I have not seen it, so I'm not yet willing to do that, but if we reference within the lease back to that FAA guidance and say, you can only do what this says you can do because that's what the FAA says.
That's fine. Yeah. If that basically takes a variety of the control out of your hands and puts it in the FAA's hands.
Well, it takes questions away from everybody is what I'm getting at. If there's already something out there, guidance or a legal requirement by the FAA, then that's what we should be doing.
Okay, that's fine too. Mayor, you and City Council are the decision makers for policy at the city. And, the best I can do is provide you with information and, stuff that I have in writing and my experience. At the end of the day, it's up to you all to decide what the policy is. And this particular document, it was not in the packet, so I'm not sure whether I can provide this to you here or whether we have to provide that at a different time.
Well, I think what right now we're talking about and what the agenda item is the format of this particular lease agreement. So if we have issues with it, they may get cleared up at another time. I'm not going to take the time tonight, and the reason I'm not going to is because I don't think this is the proper forum for it, to address every one of these items and try and work it all out, because once again, I don't believe that's the job of the council, and I do understand you're not implying that either. But that's what I want to make clear is, we're not here to hash out every section of this agreement. We're here to indicate the issues that each one of us may have, and then there would have to be agreement on how that might get fixed.
I can understand that.
Fair enough?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I also share that concern about what is maintenance if we're telling them they have to maintain it.
Yeah, so we can write some more information on that. The maintenance that I was alluding to in this was maintenance as in sweeping the floor and not allowing oil to build up on the floor, not putting trash out in front of the hangar. Maintenance, they got to change their own light bulbs or something. You know, that basic stuff that you do at home. You know, if you're in a rental house, you change your light bulbs, you sweep the floor, you vacuum the floor, you wash the counters. That's the type of stuff. Perhaps I should have said janitorial or something like that. Probably would have been a better word. As far as maintenance on the structure, actual physical maintenance, as in if something's falling off, if you got a loose screw or leak or something like that, that's the airport's responsibility. So.
Again, I think we would all be better off if we define it that way rather than having the question in there where the city appears by this lease, rather than the triple net lease, is going to be responsible for the major maintenance items on these hangars, and the renter is going to be responsible for, as you say, janitorial type maintenance, where they need to keep it swept up, keep oil off the floor, that sort of thing. I think we need that definition in there. There's a section on maintenance.
Section 12, yeah.
Regarding the uses or type of work that can be done on an aircraft, that was also brought up during public comment. Are they allowed to do anything on the aircraft?
Yeah, there's a very specific set of rules. It's in FAR, Federal Aviation Regulation, Part 43. It's defined here, Appendix A, C, and it's incorporated by reference. And what that is that's a list of preventative maintenance that can be done on the airplane. It's very defined, very exacting. For instance, you can change the oil on your airplane, you can remove the seats, repack the wheel bearings, a variety of things like that. What you can't do in accordance with this is stuff that requires a license to do. For instance, there's a variety of types of work on an airplane that requires an airframe and power plant mechanics license or an inspector's authorization. So those things are not included in here because they're quite a bit more egregious. That's changing engines out, overhauling engines, that type of thing. Part of the reason for that is it gets into an area where that would typically be done as a commercial enterprise, and it starts to get into, if it was a commercial enterprise, you know, or you're hiring some mechanic to come in and do it to your airplane, then we start to look at what are the problems with the fire code, with OSHA regulations and that type of thing. And that changes the whole criteria of the building. And so that's why that additional type of maintenance is not contained in there. There's some nuances into that because, you know, it does say that with my approval, the way I've got it written in here, I look at somebody that's bringing in a aircraft kit, so they're going to assemble a kit airplane. So that would look like something that would be beyond what's in Part 43 here, Appendix A. Well, that's different because it's still the owner of the airplane doing the work. And typically that is not doing engine overhauls, it's doing an engine installation, which doesn't require nearly the amount of machinery, solvents, other types of thing like that. So that's why we accept construction of amateur experimental aircraft.
And is that in this FAR Part 43 then? Is that?
That is not. That's an entirely different FAR. And I'd have to look that up to tell you the truth, but there's a complete section for that.
For the construction of an experimental aircraft?
Right, well, the certification thereof. And the actual construction of it yourself, yeah, there are requirements that are in the FARs for that as well.
Again, I think we're far better off because we talk about there is language in here regarding experimental aircraft, limiting the amount of time to construct that. I believe it's a 6-month period of time.
Yes, the idea, the spirit of the FAA regulation for doing that in a hangar is the final assembly of the airplane. Again, the idea behind it is so that it's as close to just operable and airworthy aircraft operating in and out of the hangars. Most people, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of people that build these things already have an airplane. So they're building the thing from the ground up in the hangar, but it's along the side of the airplane that they already have that they're flying. So, that's going to be an acceptable thing right off the bat because they're already using it for an aeronautical activity.
Well, I understand that, but that's not the only situation that it could occur, right? Someone could get a hangar, say, I'm going to construct this aircraft, start to work on it, and not be finished within 6-month period of time.
Right, and then we look at it, and if I go in there and I say, what's going on? You've got your 6 months, yeah, you got your wings on and everything, why don't you have an airworthiness certificate? And they say, well, I'm on back order for a piece of avionics, or, a prop doesn't work or something like that. Then it's only the right thing to do to say, okay, well, you're working on your airplane, you're moving forward with it. I'm not going to kick a guy out, because he has something that, an extenuating circumstance that's going to require him a little bit longer to finish the airplane. 6 months is kind of a guideline. It says it in here, but, it's like you drive down the freeway at 70 miles an hour in a 65 zone, and the cop's not necessarily going to pull you over.
Well, what I would be much more comfortable with then is to set a period of time where it's reasonably expected that the construction would be finished. And if it's not done within that period of time, rather than going, oh, yeah, I understand, you broke your toe 4 months ago and you weren't able to work on it, so I'm going to give you a little extra time on there. You pick a period of time where it's reasonable to get the work done, knowing that there are always going to be factors involved that are going to delay a project. But you tell the person, if you're not done in this period of time, then by the terms of the lease, your lease ends. I'm not comfortable doing let's just see what happens and we'll play it by ear thing.
No, I understand that. And that is actually where the 6 months came from, was that's considered long enough to finish an airplane for the most part, because the thought back when the FAA started really looking at this stuff was, okay, person's building the fuselage in their home, then they're building the wings in their home, and they've got everything disassembled. Then they haul it down to the airport, put the wings on, put the tail on, do the rigging, run it up, and then fly it. There's also, whenever they were making this law, they were looking at what is the last 10% of the airplane. And that the 10% rule was too difficult for anybody to actually identify. So the FAA originally came up with 6 months, and that's what they were saying. And I don't believe it actually has a timeline in here now. So.
But there is either one of these FARs or there's something within the FAA language that relates to the construction of experimental aircraft.
Yes, sir.
And there's a time period within that?
The time period's actually not in this law. I'd have to find
Section 9.
Yes, ma'am?
Section 9 of the lease.
Yes. So, yeah, that's the part we're discussing, right?
Yeah, I'm not
They're
asking
working a
about the
certificate.
section of the lease. I'm asking about the FAA regulations. There is one that relates to construction of an aircraft.
Yes, sir.
And it provides a time period?
I don't believe it identifies an actual time period to construct an airplane. Sometimes airplanes take, a decade or more to build. Sometimes they take a year.
Okay.
Depends on the person doing it and what the actual airplane is, the complexity.
Well, and I understand what you're saying, that if somebody were going to take a project like that on, they could do parts of it without having a hangar, and then once they get to a certain point, they might look to see if there's an available hangar. They move the operation in there so they can start putting wings and things on that wouldn't fit wherever else they might have available for them to work. I'm saying that we should be able to come up with a reasonable period of time and not be leaving it to judgment. And it would also be incumbent on that person to know, okay, I'm going to have whatever the period of time is to get this project done. And if I can't, if I'm looking at it and I know something about airplanes, and boy, I sure hope that if you're going to put something together that goes up in the air, that you have an idea what you're doing. But if you were to do that, then you need to be able to look at the lease and say, I've got this period of time, is that doable? If it's not doable, then I shouldn't be getting a hangar to do that, not at this airport. So I think we should come up with a period of time that is not discretionary, but is a fixed period of time, and say, if you would like to do something like that, here's what the parameters are for you.
Okay, I would still probably stick with 6 months, but I can look into that a little bit further.
Thinking about, since some of these are actually probably almost all of them are going to be hobby projects. I've got hobby projects I started a really long time ago that still aren't done. So I just think we need to figure out a reasonable period of time so that anybody who's looking into doing something like that would know, do I want to get a hangar now, or do I need to find some other way to do this? Because once I get that hangar, that's the period of time I have to get this work done. And if I'm not done, I lose the hangar. I have a couple more questions. Is that, I'll finish those up? Okay. There was something else brought up in public comment regarding inspections, as to whether a tenant must be present or not. I do believe that there needs to be something in here regarding notification to a tenant. However, it's up to the tenant to decide whether they want to be there. But I would like to see language in the inspection where there would be 24 hours. I don't think a week or something like that is required, but perhaps 24 hours notification identifying the time that the inspection would be done, and that could be a time range. It could be, we will do this between 1 and 4 p.m. on next Thursday. I know some folks think, well, you can't come in. I've lived in apartments before too. Guess what? I've had that door open up several times with the maintenance guy coming in. Got to change the air filters. So, that's just the way it is when you rent. But I do think it's fair to be able to tell these tenants, we're going to inspect your hangar tomorrow afternoon.
That's fine. I can add that.
Well, I think those were the issues I had. Councilmember Bridges, you had something?
It was along those lines of the building the experimental aircraft. You said in item number 14, it says that airworthiness certificate within 6 months. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Where am I? Was that in number 9? Yeah. Tenant's aircraft shall have an airworthiness certificate and must be in operable condition. Experimental aircraft are granted 6-month grace period to obtain airworthiness certificate if the aircraft is still under construction, and that could be also placed under the number 14, the rules and standards, just to be consistent. I was thinking about somebody I knew who built an RV6, and I think it was I think his kid was going off to kindergarten. He did not have any children before he started it.
Yeah, it takes a while sometimes.
Yeah, but the experimental aircraft are different. So that was, my only comment was that in terms of what done looks like, is airworthiness certificate and operable.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Anything further, Councilmember Bridges? Thank you. Councilmember Adams?
Yeah, on that one, I just wanted to clarify, because you had stated earlier, so if the main purpose is they already have an airplane that they're using that hangar for, they could theoretically then indefinitely be working on an airplane, because the main reason is that aeronautical idea. But if somebody is not using it for storage for an aircraft and is only using it for the construction of a plane or experimental plane, that they only get that 6-month.
Yes, sir.
And then I guess if we were to come down with a hard line, I guess we would then have to discuss, are they able to then reapply for a hangar? How long, do they have to wait a day? Do we have to have them take it out? And then, all those sorts of things. I think that to me is why I understand the sentiment that we need to be sure that we have rules and not leave everything up for discretion. But, some of these things, that might be a less complicated way of meeting the same things, rather than having, similar to other situations where, meeting it by definition just to work around whatever, whatever holes we've kind of put into the system. So, I think that we would have to have that conversation. If we want to say there's no discretion, then we would also have to talk about then when can they come back to try and finish that project? How much time, can they do it the next day, 6 months after that? We'd have to have that conversation, I think.
So, yeah, it would be my intention that if they had to leave because they weren't getting work done on the airplane, that I would let them go ahead and get on the waiting list again. Right then and there. The waiting list would be, first come, first serve type of deal.
I understand. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I would like to make one other thing clear, because it comes up just constantly with this. any form of a lease regarding hangars at that airport, I think need to clarify, and I believe this does clarify, that the city is the owner of this. In looking at FAA guidance, they are clear that there is to be no private ownership on the airports. The airports are funded with government dollars, and trying to make a distinction between federal money, local money, whatever, it's not anything other than government money. And the FAA says that if they're going to put government money into an airport, there will be no private ownership on that airport, or you could run into problems and have to pay the money back. Is that a true or statement or not?
I would have to say that's partially true. Where it's slightly different is that the FAA does recognize doing land leases, and like what we've had here and what we're going through at this present time, that's to enable airport sponsors to leverage private money to do improvements on the airport. Beyond that, the FAA is very hard over about not selling any of the actual land, and also really hard over that the airport revert at some point in time the assets that are on the airport.
And again, even when we talk about the buildings, though, those are tenant improvements. And so while somebody paid money to construct that tenant improvement, it still doesn't really constitute private ownership of that structure as it is used as a hangar. It's a required tenant improvement with the understanding that it would revert. And what I'm getting at is, if the city were to say, well, we'll lease you this land, some land on the airport, and we'll let you build a building there, and forever and ever, you'll have that building. From what I read of FAA guidance, that is not what they would approve.
You are correct.
Okay. Again, I think it's very important to point out when we talk about these leases how they're going to be structured after that initial 30-year period of time. Because when we look at what the FAA says about it is, yeah, you can do it for 20 or 30 years, and then you should stop doing it. Then that property should come back, whether it's personal property, real estate, buildings, tenant improvements, whatever it is, it should stop, and that comes back to the ownership of the sponsor, the city in this case. And to do otherwise starts to indicate that there's private ownership of assets on the airport, which the FAA does not care to have happen on airports that they fund.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Folda?
Yeah, Mayor, I made corrections the last time we saw this, and apparently if for the record I need to remake them, I can at this time, because I had corrections within this that I made already that weren't changed. So I don't know if for the record I need to redo those. I can. But I also wanted to correct some of the things statements that you just made about transparency and what these lease extensions and things can happen, because the city can create a new ground lease with these operators and still follow FAA. And not only can we do that, but we started to do that. And while I understand this, none of this was brought to council before, because in the past it wasn't. It was all done administratively for the last couple of years. We didn't have, and during the time that we didn't have an airport manager, we had a consultant that was helping to help make decisions administratively for the airport. Through that process and through that hiring of that consultant, they did come up with, and the city asked them to create a study. That study had recommendations of what to do with this expiring lease agreement. The part of that was to give notice that this would happen. But on top of that, they also did release a document with Boulder City Municipal Airport letterhead called for lease. This is the guidelines for lease extensions for aviation storage hangars. This guidelines offered people, it says, this is for private ground lease tenants, non-commercial, in the general aviation storage hangars wishing to extend the term of their lease in advance of the current termination date. If you wish to participate, please notify the city up to 9 months prior to the ground lease termination and no later than 6 months prior to the ground lease termination date. Saying that no one provided this RFP with suggestions of what modifications they would make to their hangar, that's not true. There were 3 that were submitted to the city through their consultant. So, obviously there's some hang up there, but I know that there was another one that was given directly to the city attorney that he did have. And so while city council, you're correct, Mayor, that city council never did act on any of these things. These things were all not brought before them to act upon. These things were all done administratively, that there were actions being done to either extend their lease or to create a new ground lease. And those actions and steps were moving forward as late as this document was released August of 2019, which is last August. I have emails from June of last year that go back and forth as saying, they were in fact getting appraisals for what the cost of these upgrades would cost a tenant who was planning to make those improvements to their hangar for a lease extension deal. So to say that that wasn't happening, that was happening, and I understand council didn't make any decision in that because that was done administratively. Now we've come to the point where it's coming before council. But to say that that doesn't exist, that is not true. So I just want council to know that. Secondly, I want to make a motion to hold this item in abeyance until staff can review the FAA, NRS, and city and other applicable laws as to this lease.
Councilmember Folda, prior to you making a motion on this, I would like to extend the opportunity to any other member, just as you've been extended the opportunity, if they have any other comments or questions that they would like to ask. And then I would certainly encourage you to make a motion if you wish to do so at that time.
Can we finish the motion on the floor and then have discussion?
Okay.
Well, can I finish the motion?
You may.
Okay.
And again, I do understand that under Robert's rules, you have started to make a motion. What I would point out once more is we are trying to have a discussion here, but if you would like to make a motion at this time, please proceed.
I'd like to have that, and then if you discussion after that motion is made, then we can.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Yes, I didn't finish it. So I would like to make a motion to hold this item in abeyance until staff can review the applicable FAA, NRS, and Boulder City, any other applicable laws as to this lease, and bring back this item, including the financial of the obligations of both the city and tenant, including cost of insurance, management, and rates.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So, Mayor, many things were brought up about the laws that FAA has and what this contract has. And so that motion is hoping to, instead of making a motion to address every single concern that council has, because we've done this before and it came back exactly the same, so that they can review the laws and make sure that we're in conformance with the laws, because it shouldn't be the council's. We're not lawyers, And so we need to make sure before we're approving something that we might use for not only this set of hangars, the 140 hangars that come forth, that it applies to all the laws that are out there. Because there is a question, several council members, almost every one of them have brought up a legal concern that this may not apply with, FAA or NRS or Boulder City codes. Also, I would like this to come back so that we can talk about the full impact it will have, including the rates. And if we, the city, has to make insurance, there's utilities that haven't been considered because some of those airport hangars have insurance that is, or utilities, sorry, that is shared. And so that's a consideration of utilities. And you need to have the appraisal included in that because the appraisal considered whether or not utilities would be included or not. So that's something you need to have in order to make that financial decision. The other thing is that so in that motion, I was hoping to bring all that information back in a way that we can really make a determination of all things in consideration for this agenda item, not just the form itself.
Did you wish to amend your motion then to include any particular items or just as you've stated it?
I believe in reviewing all the laws that are applicable to this form would bring back and make changes to the concerns that everyone had.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, could we amend that to have a specific date, a specific meeting in which we would bring that back?
Under the rules, you may offer an amendment. It is up to the person who's made the motion whether they wish to accept your amendment or not.
Okay, I'd like to make an amendment to that motion to pick a specific date that we would have this returned for discussion by the council. And what would be the next available date to have that? City Clerk, when would that, would it have to be?
Made a request, council member. It is now up to the person making the motion as to whether they wish to accept it or not.
Specific date, okay. To have a specific date.
Because there's some studying and research that needs to be done, I did not want to put a date to this.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I'll just say
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you. I'll just say that while I agree with the concept that this is not ready for us to approve in the way that it is in front of us right now, and that further discussion is needed, I personally am not comfortable, given the circumstances of the tight time frame we are working with not giving it a date. I understand we all need the time necessary, but I do want to, as I do with everything, I want to know when this is coming forward, because I think that's the least we can do for those involved, so that they have a time frame that they know that they can work under. So I would just like to make that clear, but I understand the reasoning.
Do you wish to also make an amendment then, offer an amendment, or withdraw your second?
I'm just stating that that's what I would like to see.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hey, I would just like to point out, once again, this issue has been a known issue for an extended period of time. And I do appreciate what Councilmember Folda has said. I've listened to a lot of these tenants down there talking about, well, this was said and that was said, and this was submitted and that was submitted. I've not seen that. And when I get back to what has been put forth over the past 3 years that I've been aware of, I've attended the meetings, I've heard the consultants say, if you would like to do this, you should do this. So I will be opposing this motion for the fact that I believe the basics that are needed within a lease to go forward for these tenants is within this document. I certainly appreciate your comments earlier that we keep seeing the same stuff come back to us with no corrections of even typos. I don't feel that that is something we should have to deal with. But I do think too that this extension, or you could do this or you could do that, this is an effort to put forth a new lease so that the people down there would understand what it is they have available to them. So based on that, any other discussion by members regarding the motion that's on the floor? Councilmember Folda?
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, Mayor. But to me, the best thing that we can do for them is give them a good document. And so I think that giving this the time for that to be a better document, that's what we should give those tenants.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion fails 4-1. Okay, we are now at the point then of accepting, I want to go back to, is there anyone else who has questions or comments about the existing document? Councilmember Adams?
Mayor, I guess I would just like to clarify, since we have, we do kind of run into this situation where we all make suggestions, but, as a body, we don't necessarily agree to them. So I would just like to see that we maybe address at least those specific concerns. Personally, I would like to see this come back where we can at least address our concerns, and then before accepting this or approving this in any format, that we have seen that language at least come back to us and those concerns addressed. So I would just like to point out that my specific concerns that I would like to see addressed, and should anybody make a motion or if I'm left to make it, I would like to see language in there specifically to the maintenance and repair section. I'd like to see that cleared up to where it essentially does indicate that we are responsible for the major maintenance. I would like to see language in there regarding warranties and guarantees, in which it does clarify that, yes, the city does at least provide some sort of guarantee or warranty that the conditions of our hangars will be of an acceptable quality.
Councilmember Adams, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you please list, when you're going through that, the sections, please?
Yes, that
Thank
would
you.
be section 12 is the maintenance and repair.
I got that, yeah.
And section 16 is the warranties and guarantees. And I would also like to see, language addressing the assessment of the notification for the increase of rent. And obviously we have all addressed the NRS concern there. So those are my three main concerns right now. So I just want to put that out there. Should anybody make a motion, or should I have to make that? So.
Thank you.
I can address the issue right now with respect to the notification for increase in rent. NRS 118C deals with commercial leases, which this would be one, and there is no time period for the increase in rent. So the 30 days that you see there is based upon the month-to-month term. And so that is compliance with Nevada law. It's residential leases that do require a 45-day notification period.
Then I will ask for a 60-day notification. That would be my suggestion, is for 60 days.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I do have a question, a procedural question. Because Councilman Adams made his suggestions, does that get accepted or make it a motion just for his, or would all of them be included as one motion?
No, you can't make separate motions. So what he's trying to do is make it clear that that's what he wants to see in the motion, whoever makes it.
Okay.
So we've kept a list, but of course, if you want to reiterate what points you had concerns with in the lease, please do so. And so when the person goes to make the motion, we can all have it all set out and be clear.
Okay. Okay. I would like to make sure that we're more specific in Section 7 with use of premises, a little bit less restrictive possibly, or at least identifying those items for example, that would not be considered appropriate to be in there, but that as long as the primary purpose of an aircraft hangar is aircraft storage, and there has to be a airworthy and certified airplane in there, that they may be able to store something else on, that's not aviation necessarily. And also, be consistent between Section 9 airworthiness certificate with the 6-month grace period, along with Section 14 that talks about the construction of experimental aircraft, that's consistent with the 6 months to airworthiness. And also, yes, who pays for what repairs? If it's internal, external, and I also am concerned about the maintenance repair. Changing Section 19, first word tenant. And that's it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mayor, I have some.
Councilmember Folda?
Thank you. I'm going to attempt to relist my original concerns from the last time we saw this. Under number 3, the rental amount, under 3.3 and 3.4, so let me try to say this. There needs to be a definition of what late payment is considered. The first one says if you're 30 days late, you can terminate immediately. The second one says if you're making payments more than 3 times late in a 24-hour period, you may terminate this agreement within 30 days notice. So just a definition of what late payment is. The term verbiage in number 4, that we can terminate this agreement except for unlawful reasons. Just some clarification on the legal verbiage of that. Under number 6, it says that the tenant's spouse may be provided an access card. I would just change that to I would look at the legal reasons, or how we can legally provide a secondary card to a non-married person. So right now it specifically says a secondary card can be given to a spouse. So changing it to more general, where because if this is a shared tenant or a family member tenant, how they get a secondary card if they're not married. The other were 7 gives sorry. I believe it says, I just want to make sure that there's a quote on here where a tenant-owned aircraft has to be within there, and just so that we are giving them enough time to register whatever the process is for registering an aircraft into their own name, that it's given an amount of time that would allow that, because there is I think a 7 to 14 days clause on that one.
Number 8, that was Section 8.
Section 8, thank you. Yeah, right, there's a change of ownership under Section 8 that you give a certain amount of time. So just so that we're allowing enough time for a registered, I don't know what the process is of what it would be to register into someone's name an aircraft. The other one was clarification under number 12 of, I think it was covered under Councilman Adams' request of the maintenance and repair, because right now, in clarification that it would be without cost or expense to the city, so clarification on that language as well. Hopefully that's all. Number 28 had a typo. It says city in Boulder City instead of city of Boulder City. There's 2 typos with that wording in that number 28. And there's separately 2 different times in there. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, at this time, what I'm going to attempt to do is to make a motion. I will certainly consider any amendments to that. I've been making some notes here, but may have missed someone's concerns, and at least as far as I've heard, I am in agreement with the majority of the concerns. So I'm going to try and include these in the motion. Councilmember Folda, again, I think you have a good point that when these things are done and we see nodding of heads, it's as though there's agreement that there's something wrong that needs to be corrected, and then we see it again and nothing's changed. So I will consider amendments to this, so if I have missed someone's concern, I will be happy to invite those amendments so that we get everyone's concern addressed here. I'm not saying that there can't be something that I won't accept as an amendment, but I will try and go through these and do that. So my motion is that the changes that we're going to include here be made to the document, that the document be brought back to our June 23rd meeting. Once again, as Councilman Adams has pointed out, we are under time constraints here because of the expiration of the existing lease. So to have these changes made and brought back for consideration at our June 23rd, 2020 meeting. Item 3. Provide a 60-day notice of rate increases. Item number 6, access card not limited to the spouse. Number 7, personal property referenced with regard to specific FAA regulations for what may be stored in a hangar. Number 8, define the time period to submit the certificate required within that section. Number 12, define what maintenance is the responsibility of the city. Number 14, that already has a reference to the FAR or the particular FAA regulations. If there's anything that needs to be otherwise referenced, that should be noted in there for FAA. Number 9, excuse me, I skipped the airworthiness certificate, and I believe that also related to the experimental aircraft which I can't see the reference for the section number on there right at this moment. With regard to experimental aircraft, they would have 1 year to either have it airworthy or lose the lease for that particular hangar. Item number 15, inspection. Provide 24-hour notice of inspection. However, if for cause, there may be no notice to the tenant. Number 16, warranty, guarantee. Again, definition of what that means with regard to the condition of the hangar. Number 19, replace the word lessee with the word tenant. And those are the notes I have, so that will be my motion, and I would request a second. If I receive a second, then we will entertain any amendments to the motion. Is there anyone willing to second this?
I will second that motion.
All right, we will then open it for discussion. Councilmember Adams, anything that you would like to offer as an amendment?
My concerns were addressed in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bridges, anything that you would like to offer as an amendment?
No, thank you. Everything that I suggested was addressed, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoskins?
No changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Folder?
Yes, Mayor, can you tell me, were there any changes to number 3 and defining what a late payment is?
I believe I did list that.
Sorry if I missed it.
Well, and again, I believe I listed that only as define late for multiple payments. However, I would encourage you to make an amendment to that as the wording you would prefer.
To try to make that formal or just?
Yes, you need to make it formal.
Okay, so let me think. Okay.
That way I can make acceptance or rejection formal.
So before I do, let me clarify. There was some typos in section 28. I don't think you said those.
Okay, we'll
do
take that as another
separate one?
Yes.
Okay. So the first amendment, Mayor, then I would move to define in section 3 what the definition of a late payment is.
With regard to the multiple late payments, I believe.
Well, yes. It's 30 days in section 3.2 and it's not defined in 3.3. And then that's that motion. Do I need a second?
I will accept that amendment.
Okay. This, Mayor, then I move for another motion of addressing the typos in section 28. When it refers to the city of Boulder City, there's 2 times in there. It is written in an unstandard way.
Okay, I will also accept that amendment and request the second be confirmed with the amendments.
I confirm the second with the amendments.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. Okay. We will now move to agenda item number 9, which is our last public comment period. During this public comment period, you may comment on any issue. The phone number to call is 702-589-9629. Again, our final public comment period is open. The phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Yeah, hi, this is Rich Moynihan.
Go ahead, Mr. Moynihan.
Okay, a number of points I would like to comment on over this meeting. I know the council and the mayor complained about how much time they're spending on airport items. And I think part of the problem is the airport manager. He's presented numerous documents that are poorly written, so you're wasting time on those, i.e. the fuel program and this rental agreement. So and I'm not trying to pick on the airport manager, but he says he's professional. But the building of experimental aircraft is covered in the FAA's policy on non-aeronautical storage. This was changed 4 years ago. And prior to that time, final assembly of an experimental aircraft was allowed. In the document effective July 1st of 2016, they changed it, and it's not final assembly, it's complete assembly. And it says it right in there that building of experimental kit airplanes is an aeronautical activity and is permitted. He needs to get up to date. I can't believe that he doesn't know that, so he's either, I don't know what the word would be, he's either misleading you or he's incompetent for not knowing that. So you wasted 30 minutes discussing all that on experimental aircraft when it's allowed. And as far as the FAA is concerned, the city can't be more restrictive. And that's why they did this document on non-aeronautical storage. They had meetings and hearings for 2 years, then issued this new document because of all these problems that we talked about tonight. So I'm glad that at least the council finally got together, even though it wasn't exactly what I wanted. They're sending this back to staff, and you need to tell them, bring it back when it's right. The other misleading comment was about non-aeronautical use of the hangar. The policy on this says that if you have an aircraft in there, that's the aeronautical activity, airplane storage. And anything that is stored in there that does not interfere with that airplane storage is called non-incidental storage, and it's permitted. This was changed in 2016, and that's why it was changed, because of all these problems. The other thing, he talked about Part 43. That's the maintenance that an individual can do on his own airplane. As far as maintenance in the hangar, it's actually specified in the grants and assurances that an owner can, or his employee can work on his own airplane in his hangar or on the ramp. That's completely different from Part 43. That's the grants and assurances that allows him to do that. The other misleading comment, I think I covered it. Non-aeronautical storage. As I said, you guys can Google this policy, FAA policy on non-aeronautical storage. And when you Google that, there are a page or two of question and answers that answer most of the questions that you brought up. In fact, I'm going to forward that to all of you so that you can look at it. You've been misled again tonight. As far as the mayor saying he didn't receive any proposals, that's because staff didn't report them to him. I submitted a lease proposal, and I know of one, maybe two other ones. I got a reply back from the city attorney that he was forwarding it to the consultant. I also submitted a lease proposal recently to all of you and the city attorney, city manager, and airport manager. I got an email back from the city attorney that said, did you send this to the airport manager? And I did. So even though you haven't been presented with proposals, proposals have been submitted in accordance with that document that the airport put out on its website, guidelines for lease of proposal extensions. And like the mayor said, he hasn't seen this. It's because staff doesn't present it to him. They only tell you guys what they want you to hear. I'm glad the mayor mentioned just putting in the language subject to FAA policy or FAA rules. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem because people are going to go to the FAA and say, hey, they're not allowing this. So, and as far as the airworthiness certificate,
Mr. Moynihan,
1 year.
Mr. Moynihan, you're over the time limit. Please conclude your comments.
Okay. Your last comment about the airworthiness certificate in 1 year, that's absurd. Nobody builds an airplane in 1 year. And it's not necessary because the FAA policy is that construction of that aircraft is permitted.
All right,
so
Mr. Moynihan, again, I need you to conclude your comments, please.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, the line is now available. If there's anyone who would like to call in for the last public comment period, the phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Yes, my name is Joel Smith. I wrote a letter earlier that you read, Hangar T213 for the record. My only comment is I would hope that somebody on that council would make a motion tonight to say if we are going to allow 60 days for an increase, you are about to increase my cost by 100%. It's going to go from $52 a month to over $500 a month in less than 30 days. So if today's the 9th, if you're going to follow this policy and you're giving a 30-day notice to increase where the attorney said there is no requirement because it's a commercial operation, again, we're less than 30 days away. The mayor even brought it up himself. I would like for someone to at least tell these people in advance so they financially can be prepared. You're not leaving me any room to financially be prepared. If I'm going to go from $52 a month to over $500 a month starting on July the 2nd. That's my comment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, the line is available. Anyone wishing to call?
Public comment.
Hi. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, this is Cammie Perkins with Howard & Howard. As the council knows, I represent several hangar owners. I've written multiple letters to the council. I'd like to submit my public comment. The mayor was right about two things tonight, and only two things. Number one, it should not be the council's job to vet out a legal document. The council has a city attorney to do that. The problem is you have a city attorney that none of you trust. The mayor said so in his own news article last week. You can't pick and choose which legal advice you pick to accept. You either trust the council's lawyer or you don't. You can't simply accept it when it behooves you and you want it to happen, which is reversion here. This is the most flawed lease I've ever seen in my legal career. I think someone found this lease on LegalZoom or the like, which is a shame considering how much the city has paid over the years to have a well-drafted land lease drafted just within the last few years, which none of you council people have ever even seen. I believe that land lease is tucked away deep in the city attorney's drawers, and I don't know why it's being hidden from you. Second, the mayor was correct for the second time in the meeting, the only second time, that this issue has been discussed for years. But respectfully, the mayor should go through all of the documents that I've been going through for the past several weeks. The mayor stated he's not seen representations made to the tenants regarding extended leases or entering into a new ground lease. Respectfully, Mr. Mayor, you should read all of the meeting minutes that I have, including all of the meeting minutes over the last 5 years. It might take you hours because I have spent hours. I will send them to you. Apparently, you have not read them. You will read them soon enough. The city has made representations that people justifiably relied on. And you should talk to your constituents who voted for you, like I have talked to your constituents. I suggest you go through your email inbox again. I'd like to say I appreciate Councilwoman Folda's intelligence, her integrity, and her wisdom, echoed by, I believe, Councilman Adams and Councilwoman Bridges. You council people are not attorneys, although I believe you are brilliant. And respectfully, Mr. Williamson is not a legal scholar. He's spouting out legal advice to you as if he is your legal counsel. I believe Mr. Morris has an agenda. He has failed to disclose to all of you what he is ethically obligated to disclose to you under Nevada law. The fact that he has a private ownership in a plane, he leases a hangar at the Boulder City Airport. He's never disclosed this fact. He should not be giving you legal advice on this matter, and I urge you, as I did in my multiple letters to you, to please retain independent legal counsel on this matter. I cannot stress to you how important this is. You are not receiving independent and unbiased advice. I have watched this unfold and seen what city staff is doing to you. The metaphor, let them boil slowly, is what rings clear to me. I've been watching this unfold for months. You're being bullied and painted into a corner. Respectfully, you council people should not have to spend your valuable and precious time away from your family and friends tonight, especially during times like this, discussing this enormously flawed lease and this entirely flawed concept. This lease in of itself is unfounded. You've heard all of the comments from your constituents, the people who elected you to serve them. There has not been a single public comment against entering into a new land lease with higher rates, paying more, not putting the city out one bit, making the city money. I sent you detailed correspondence on this. Again, I strongly encourage you all to retain outside counsel to guide you on this issue. Your current city attorney has a conflict. He failed to disclose it to you. He's not providing you with correct or competent advice. Last, I don't appreciate the manner in which the mayor consistently cuts each of you off every time you have an intelligent thought that's counter to his agenda. Your constituents, the people who voted for you, are begging for an opportunity to have their point of view truly represented. And I believe you owe that to them. Thank you.
Thank you. The phone line is available. The phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Good evening. I got a public comment.
Go ahead.
My name is Douglas Mueller, and I'm speaking as a resident of Boulder City as well as an airport constituent. I have a couple comments. One of them, which is outside of Amendment 8, which you guys might be welcome to hear. But do I understand in the first agenda item when the budget was discussed that the airport budget reserve is earmarked for the general fund reserve as well as all the other funds? You're earmarking all of the reserves, which the Boulder City Airport Fund Reserve cannot be used for the general fund. Do I understand that correct? I would like an answer. The next thing is on Agenda 8, number 8, it was presented as a rental agreement rather than a long-term lease agreement. That is not consistent with national airports. I strongly encourage city staff to go out and grab a lease that is consistent with national airports if they wish to maintain federal funding, because we're talking about fair and equitable, and city staff is not consistent with doing that. So I strongly urge you folks to get a copy of it and then paraphrase it or whatever you need to custom tailor it. But doing a month-to-month commercial lease is absolutely unacceptable, and it will be fought. That's all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you. And again, the phone number is 702-589-9629, and the line is currently available.
Public comment.
Yes, Judy D. Shane. I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
I was watching in the lease as well as some other things. This isn't the first time where council members make a suggestion, and as Councilwoman Folder says, you get the stuff back and it's still garbage, and things that shouldn't be garbage with typos or dates or other things that are wrong. And these are supposedly vetted by the city attorney. He does a crap job of vetting it, and the city manager also. Somebody has to get their act together and present things from the staff that are understandable and are correct as to dates and times, dollar amounts, even as to addresses. Often those are wrong. This is really a ridiculous thing that the city staff and city manager, city attorney, wherever, but these people have to get their act together. This is just not acceptable as far as the public is concerned. We need actual positive things, and when you only put a little bit of this, a little bit of that in the staff reports and the documents that back it up, and things are missing, that is not fair to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. The number for public comment is 702-589-9629. The line is currently available.
Public comment.
Yeah, my name's Matt. We'll just use this as an example.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat your name? I only heard the first name.
Yeah, my name's Matt Reagan. I'm in hangar 2-8.
Thank you.
I just want to use this as an example of what I believe is how flawed this whole process is, and I'll give you an example of what I've had to experience. I put my hangar up for sale, 2-17, and I had it requested to have it listed on the Boulder City website, flybouldercity.com. On that website, it says, just please wait for 7 to 10 days for the site to post the ad. This is run by the Boulder City Airport Management. It is now 13 going on 14 days later, and it's still not posted. So my point is something as simple as posting a silly little ad on the Boulder City website. They can't even get that within the time frame of 7 to 10 days as it is posted on the website, that we should have no assurances that these people are capable of running 130 hangars. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to make a comment in the final public comment period? The phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment. Hello? Sure someone's on the line. Mary Hoskins.
If there's a caller on the line, if you would identify yourself, please.
Hello?
Once again, if there's a caller on the line, please identify yourself. We cannot hear you. All right, it appears that caller is hung up. The line is available. Phone number 702-589.
Public comment. Public comment. Oh, he hung up too. He'd already spoken.
All right. Again, the line is available currently. The phone number is 702-589-9629. Anyone wishing to speak in the final public comment period, the phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Yes, good evening. Mayor McManus, why have you not referenced more of your industry professionals with the AAC?
Sir, would you please identify yourself?
Yes, my name is Rod Morwick.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Why have you not referenced AAC, your professional industry people on the AAC? That was my question, because you guys are referencing a lot of city staff. And I don't understand, because you got a committee to help you aid in the system making decisions regarding all things regarding airport function. And they're there to help you. They meet and everything, but they haven't been resourced. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to comment in the final public comment period? The phone number is 702-589-9629. And just with regard to the last call, these public comment periods are not discussion periods. So although questions may be asked by the public, this is not discussion time by the council. We do not respond to those questions at this time. And anyone wishing to speak in public comment, the number is 702-589-9629. Again, the phone number for public comment is 702-589-9629. All right, hearing no others, we will close the public comment period and move to our last agenda item, number 10, council reports. We will start with Mr. Adams. Councilmember Adams, any report?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to take this opportunity to address the larger conversation that is being had in communities right now throughout our nation, including ours. right now, cities are reeling as we witness the boiling over of frustrations, anger, fear, desperation that's been centuries in the making. I know many, like myself, have found it difficult to find the right words to meet this moment. But right now, at the same time, there are marginalized voices throughout our nation that are crying out to be heard. And so perhaps the best way for us to move forward is to stop, to listen, and to reflect. Simply because we have come so far does not excuse us from continuing to move forward. We can respect our institutions while still demanding better from them. We must accept that we cannot say that all lives matter if we are not willing to admit and to acknowledge that Black lives do matter. So please, I ask everyone to meet this moment not as an opportunity to spread indignation or hatred, but rather as a moment for us to all grow as individuals, for us to grow as a community, and for us to grow together as one people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bridges?
No, I want to thank you for that. That was quite eloquent. No, I have nothing more to add. That sums up my thought.
Thank you. Councilmember Hoskins?
Yes. I'd like to say thanks to Chief Shea for all of his involvement with the protesters, and thanks to Mayor McManus, Lisa, and Holly for their part. We have an incredible fortunate that things worked out the way they did. And after our council meeting concerning the chamber, there was inaccurate information and insulting remarks made by specific individuals. During the council meeting, I pointed out the errors in the agreement, and I'm not ashamed of fulfilling my fiduciary duty. I will always make council decisions based on what is best for the city, even if I think the person or the organization is great. I certainly think that the chamber is essential, and Jill is doing a great job. The businesses support the chamber, and I was sure that one of our businesses would offer a home for the chamber. In the past 2 weeks, I have been spending my time speaking with business people to broker an agreement between them and the chamber. Jill and I met yesterday with a business person who is very excited to welcome the chamber. We are extremely pleased with this solution, and the three of us will continue to work together. This is an example of positive outcomes that can happen when the goal is for the betterment of the community and not for political advantage. I am most certainly supportive of our business community, and I believe that all of our members of this council are also supportive. Cooperation in finding solutions is what is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Holden?
Thank you, Mayor. As the weather is getting warmer, I want to bring attention to concern of water activities and children. And so there is in Southern Nevada, the Southern Nevada Child Drowning Prevention Coalition. This is a nonprofit organization dedicated to reducing Southern Nevada's high child drowning rate. On average, 8 children have drowned each year in Southern Nevada since the year 2000. The majority of drowning victims were 4 years old or younger, and the majority of the incidents occurred in residential swimming pools. The ABCDs of prevention are A, adult supervision, B, barriers for your pool, C, classes in both CPR and swimming, and D, devices, either personal flotation devices, life jackets, and rescue tools. Boulder City is a partner with the grants that these nonprofits give each year that provide reimbursement for children 4 years and younger that complete swimming lessons here in Boulder City. So if you have a child that's 4 years or younger and you would like to participate in that program, please contact our city pool. We'll be starting opening on the 10th, tomorrow. Sorry, I gotta remember which date it is. Tomorrow, our Boulder City Pool will reopen. And with that, you can contact the city as we start to ramp up and work through this phase that we're in. We will be providing some classes, and if you have a child that's 4 or under and you complete a course, you can be reimbursed for the charge of that class. So just want to bring attention to this as swimming becomes the sport when it's warm, and to keep an eye on our little ones. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a meeting this morning that I participated in for the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. One of the things that they have focused their advertising on to welcome people back to Las Vegas is to show the work that's being done by the resorts, especially to keep visitors safe when they do come to Las Vegas. This last weekend was the first weekend since the reopening of the large resorts. It apparently went pretty well. They are seeing increases in not just airline traffic coming into Las Vegas, but also the Regional Transportation Commission has reported they're seeing more paying customers on routes all over Las Vegas, which to me is an indication that folks are getting an opportunity to get back to work. The other issue, the other side of this is there was a message that came out today that over the past 5 days, Nevada is starting to see a slight, and it is slight, but a slight uptick in the number of reported infections. And so I would just like to say that, you know, if we're going to be successful in getting the economy of Nevada going again, we really need to take this virus seriously. We need to continue to take the safety precautions, wearing a face mask or covering out in public, washing your hands frequently, don't gather in large groups. There was another number out that more than half of the states in the country are reporting increases in infections. So I think we need to be careful about that. And I too appreciate the comments that Councilmember Adams made. You know, watching again on TV as a person is murdered, it just should not happen. And I do know that our police are hardworking. They do the right things, but there are instances, and there are far too many of those instances, where especially African Americans are being killed. And that's just not right in this country. It never was right, but it's far less right today. And I would say too that if you do want to protest, do it, make it effective, but be lawful in what you're doing. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.